The ship of Theseus. The ship of Theseus is one of the most haunting thought experiments ever conceived because it forces us to confront the terrifyingly fragile nature of identity. Imagine a ship admired for centuries that is slowly repaired piece by piece. Over time, every single plank, nail, and rope is replaced until not a single original part remains. Is it still the same ship, or has it become something entirely new, only wearing the ghost of its former self? The deeper you sit with this question, the more unsettling it becomes, because the ship is not just a ship, it is you. Your body today is not the same body you had 10 years ago. Cells die, regenerate, and are replaced until almost nothing of your physical self remains from the past. Even your thoughts, beliefs, and memories are altered and restructured over time. So who are you really? Are you the person you were at 5 years old, at 15, or have you been endlessly dying and being reborn without ever noticing? The ship of Theseus rips away the comforting illusion that you are a fixed, permanent being. What makes you you? Is it your physical body, your memories, the story you tell yourself about your past? And if every part of you can change, what stops you from becoming anyone you want? The belief that you are trapped by your past, your mistakes, or even your identity shatters under the weight of this experiment. If the ship remained itself, despite every part being replaced, then you can too. If the ship became something new, then you are free to become something new as well. The ship of Theseus whispers that identity is fluid and limitation is nothing but an illusion. The invisible gorilla. The invisible gorilla is a shocking psychological experiment that reveals just how blind we can be, even when we believe we are paying close attention. In the original study, participants were asked to watch a video of people passing basketballs back and forth and to count the number of passes. Most watched carefully, convinced they were focused and accurate, but in the middle of the game, a person in a full gorilla suit casually walked through the players, beat their chests, and strolled out. Nearly half of the participants never noticed. They were so locked into their task that the gorilla, massive, obvious, unforgettable, was completely invisible to them. This experiment exposes a brutal truth about human perception. What we see is not reality, but what we choose to notice, and what we don't notice could be life-changing. Think about the limitations this creates. Opportunities walk right past us. Relationships signal their collapse. Warning signs of burnout scream for attention, yet we are blind because we are looking elsewhere. The gorilla is always there, in your career, your health, your relationships, your dreams, but your focus determines whether you see it or not. How many chances have you missed because your mind was counting passes instead of scanning the bigger picture? How many solutions stood right in front of you while you told yourself there were none? The invisible gorilla reveals that the boundaries of your life are not built from reality, but from attention. What you don't allow yourself to see simply doesn't exist for you. And once you understand this, you begin to realize that the cage was never real. You just weren't looking in the right direction. The twin Earth problem. The twin Earth problem is a mind-bending thought experiment that rips apart the way we think about words, meaning, and even our grasp on reality. Imagine a planet just like Earth in every single way. It has oceans, trees, people, and even a substance that looks, tastes, and behaves exactly like water. The only difference is that on twin Earth, this liquid isn't H2O. It's made of an entirely different chemical structure, XYZ. To the people there, it is still called water. They drink it, bathe in it, and depend on it for survival, just as we do. But here is the unsettling question. When someone on Earth says water, and someone on twin Earth says water, are they talking about the same thing? The more you think about it, the more it shakes your sense of certainty. Words you use every day may not actually capture the reality you think they do. Meaning isn't just about what you believe inside your mind. It depends on the world outside of you. This realization can be terrifying because it suggests that your entire understanding of reality may be anchored not in truth, but in convention, habit, and assumption. What if the things you've always believed to be true are only true in the small world you inhabit? What if other versions of reality, just as coherent and convincing, exist right beside yours? The twin Earth problem reveals the limits of language and belief. It exposes how fragile your definitions are and how easily your entire worldview could collapse if the foundation beneath your words were to shift. It leaves you staring at your own reality, wondering if you have ever really understood it at all. Mary's Room. Mary's Room is a thought experiment that slices open the illusion that knowledge alone is enough to understand reality. Picture Mary, a brilliant scientist who has lived her entire life in a black and white room. She studies vision in excruciating detail, learning every fact about color, how light wavelengths work, how the eye processes signals, how the brain interprets them. She knows everything science can possibly explain about color, yet she has never actually seen it. One day, Mary leaves her room and sees a red rose for the first time. In that instant, she experiences something she never could have learned from books or theories. She discovers what it is like to see red. This experiment explodes the belief that intellectual knowledge is the same as true understanding. You can study love, joy, fear, or freedom endlessly, but until you live them, you don't really know them. Mary's Room is a mirror to your own life. How many things do you claim to know, yet have never actually felt? You may know what courage is, but have you ever stood trembling and acted anyway? You may know what forgiveness is, but have you ever released a wound that defined you? The walls of Mary's Room are the walls of your comfort zone. They are built from theories, secondhand stories, and safe observation. Stepping out means surrendering to experience, with all its chaos and raw intensity. The lesson of Mary's Room is a punch to the heart. Life cannot be fully lived from the mind. Reality does not ask for your knowledge, it demands your presence. The experience machine. The experience machine is a thought experiment that forces you to face a question most people spend their lives avoiding. Do you want happiness or do you want reality? Imagine a machine that can give you any experience you desire. You could plug in and live a life of endless success, love, beauty, and pleasure. You'd never know it wasn't real, because inside the machine it would feel exactly like reality. No pain, no failure, no disappointment, only bliss. Now the question, would you plug in? At first, the temptation is overwhelming. Who wouldn't want a perfect life without struggle? But then comes the haunting realization. If you say yes, you are choosing to abandon reality for an illusion. You are saying that your life doesn't have to be true, it just has to feel good. The experience machine crushes the belief that pleasure equals meaning. It exposes a deep part of you that craves something more than comfort. If happiness was all you needed, you would run to the machine without hesitation. But something inside rebels. You don't just want joy, you want authenticity. You want your struggles to be real, your victories to be earned, your love to be with another living, breathing soul. This thought experiment slams into the heart like a thunderbolt because it reveals that pain, loss, and hardship are not barriers to a meaningful life. They are the very proof of it. The experience machine leaves you with a terrifying yet liberating truth. A flawless illusion can never compare to the messy, uncertain, unfiltered reality you are already living. Buridan's ass. Buridan's ass is a brutal parable about hesitation, indecision, and the deadly cost of overthinking. Imagine a donkey placed exactly midway between two identical piles of hay. Both piles are equally fresh, equally abundant, and equally close. The donkey, unable to find a reason to choose one over the other, stands frozen in perfect indecision. Time passes, hunger gnaws deeper, and eventually the donkey starves to death, despite standing in reach of everything it needed to live. This chilling image is not about a donkey at all. It is about you. How many times have you stood in the middle of your own choices, terrified of making the wrong move, endlessly weighing pros and cons until the moment passed and the opportunity withered? Buridan's ass exposes the paralysis of perfection, the lie that there is a right choice waiting to be discovered. In reality, the worst decision is no decision. Every day you are faced with crossroads, jobs to pursue, relationships to enter or leave, dreams to chase or abandon. You convince yourself that more time, more clarity, more certainty will come if you just wait. But waiting becomes a prison. The donkey dies not because food was out of reach, but because it refused to choose. And so do people. Dreams die, love dies, potential dies, not from lack of opportunity, but from fear of commitment. Buridan's ass forces you to see indecision for what it truly is, self-destruction in slow motion. The choice itself matters less than the courage to move, because motion creates momentum, and momentum is life. The Swamp Man. The Swamp Man is a thought experiment that rattles the very foundation of identity and meaning. Imagine a man walking through a swamp during a storm. Lightning strikes, vaporizing him instantly. In that same moment, by sheer chance, another lightning bolt rearranges particles in the swamp to create an exact duplicate of his body, cell for cell, molecule for molecule. This new being looks identical, speaks the same words, has the same memories, and even believes it is the same person who entered the swamp. But here's the shattering question. Is this swamp man really the same person, or just an empty copy wearing someone else's life? If every memory, every feeling, every piece of your identity can be replicated perfectly, then what makes you you? Is it the body, the mind, the soul, or something else that cannot be touched? The Swamp Man forces you to confront the horrifying possibility that continuity is just an illusion. You think you are the same person you were yesterday, but your cells have changed, your thoughts have shifted, and pieces of you have died and been replaced. Are you any more you than the creature born out of the swamp? This experiment shatters the belief that identity is stable and untouchable. It shows you that who you think you are is not fixed, not permanent, not safe. If a perfect copy could live your life tomorrow, then the only thing that makes you real is this exact moment. The Swamp Man reveals the fragile, fleeting truth of existence. Identity is not guaranteed, and the self you cling to may be nothing more than a story written in water. Brain in a vat. The brain in a vat is one of the most unsettling thought experiments because it dares to whisper that everything you know might be nothing but an elaborate lie. Imagine your brain carefully removed from your body, placed in a tank of nutrients to keep it alive, and connected to a supercomputer. That computer feeds you signals so perfect, so seamless, that you believe you are still walking through streets, feeling rain on your skin, hearing laughter, and tasting food. Your entire reality becomes nothing more than electrical impulses carefully delivered to your mind. Here's the terrifying question. How would you know the difference? If everything you see, hear, touch, and remember could be fabricated, then what exactly anchors you to truth? The thought burns deep because it reveals how fragile our grasp on reality truly is. Every belief you hold could be nothing more than programming. Every limit you feel could be nothing more than an illusion you've accepted as real. The brain in a vat doesn't just attack your certainty about the world, it attacks your certainty about yourself. If your memories could be rewritten, if your experiences could be artificial, then who are you really? And if you can't even prove your reality is real, what else have you been blindly accepting as untouchable truth? The power of this thought experiment is that it tears down the invisible walls you didn't even realize were holding you back. If reality itself can be questioned, then every belief Every fear, every impossible boundary in your life deserves to be questioned too. The Chinese room. The Chinese room is a thought experiment that shatters the comforting illusion that intelligence and understanding are the same. Imagine a man locked inside a room with no knowledge of the Chinese language. Outside the room, native Chinese speakers slip written questions under the door. Inside, the man has a massive rule book that tells him exactly how to respond with Chinese characters based on the symbols he receives. He follows the instructions perfectly, sending back answers that convince the outsiders he is fluent. To them, it seems he understands Chinese. But the brutal truth is that he doesn't understand a single word. He is just manipulating symbols. This experiment rips apart the assumption that performing a task correctly equals true comprehension. It is a direct challenge not only to artificial intelligence, but also to human belief in surface-level knowledge. How often do you, like the man in the room, repeat patterns, phrases, and behaviors without ever truly grasping what they mean? How much of your life is a script you've been handed rather than a language you actually understand? The Chinese room drags into the light the terrifying possibility that we mistake imitation for understanding, both in machines and in ourselves. It whispers that you might be going through life responding to symbols, chasing money, approval, status, without ever touching the meaning beneath them. It exposes the emptiness of action without awareness, of knowledge without wisdom, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The question that lingers like a shadow is this: are you truly understanding your life, or are you just following the rulebook that was shoved into your hands? The grandfather paradox. The grandfather paradox is one of the most unsettling riddles of time and existence. Imagine you build a time machine and travel back to the past. While there, you prevent your grandfather from ever meeting your grandmother. If they never meet, your parent is never born. And if your parent is never born, then you never exist. But if you never exist, how could you have gone back in time in the first place to stop their meeting? The paradox traps you in a loop of impossibility, a haunting cycle where cause and effect collapse on themselves. What makes this thought experiment so shattering is not just the logic of time travel, but the way it mirrors your own life. How often do you strangle yourself with what ifs? What if I hadn't made that mistake? What if I had taken that chance? What if I could go back and change it all? The grandfather paradox rips that illusion apart. You cannot edit the past without erasing the very self who longs to change it. Your regrets are woven into the person you have become, and to undo them is to undo yourself. This realization is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it proves the past is sealed and untouchable, locked beyond your reach, no matter how desperately you want it back. Liberating because it forces you to confront the truth. The only timeline you can shape is the one unfolding right now. The grandfather paradox whispers a truth many never face, that your power lies not in rewriting yesterday, but in creating a tomorrow that makes the past irrelevant. Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger's cat is one of the most unsettling thought experiments in science because it pulls back the curtain on the strangeness of reality itself. Imagine a cat sealed inside a box with a tiny vial of poison, a radioactive particle, and a detector. If the particle decays, the detector triggers the poison and the cat dies. If the particle does not decay, the cat lives. But here is the terrifying twist. Quantum mechanics tells us that until the box is opened, the particle exists in a state of both decayed and not decayed, which means the cat is both alive and dead at the same time. This bizarre paradox was designed to expose the absurdity of blindly applying quantum theory to everyday life, but it also strikes at something deeper. It reveals that reality does not always obey the simple categories we cling to: life and death, success and failure, freedom and captivity. All of these may coexist in ways we cannot comprehend until we open the box. How often in your own life do you declare something impossible, over, or ruined before truly seeing what it is? How often do you suffocate under certainty when in truth multiple possibilities are still alive? Schrodinger's cat shows us that reality is not fixed, but fluid, suspended between outcomes until observation collapses it into one. The box is your life. Inside, countless versions of your future exist, waiting for you to choose which one becomes real. The belief that you are trapped in only one fate dissolves here, because until you decide, the cat is both alive and dead, and your story is still unwritten. Laplace's demon. Laplace's demon is a thought experiment that confronts you with the crushing weight of determinism. Imagine an all-knowing intelligence, a demon with infinite power to calculate every particle in the universe, its exact position, and every law that governs its motion. For this being, the past and the future collapse into a single vision. Every event that has happened and every event that ever will happen is laid bare, predictable, and inevitable. The birth of stars, the fall of empires, the moment you first cried, and the moment you will take your last breath, all written in the same script, impossible to alter. Sit with that for a moment. If Laplace's demon is right, then your sense of choice is an illusion. Every decision you've ever made, from who you loved to the mistakes that broke you, was predetermined by the state of the universe long before you were born. The belief that you could have done differently becomes a haunting ghost. The what-ifs that keep you awake at night dissolve, because there never was a what-if. There was only what is. And yet, buried inside this terrifying possibility is a kind of liberation. If everything is determined, then your failures were never flaws. They were inevitabilities. Your regrets were never choices. They were destinations. The fear of making the wrong move loses its grip, because the move you make is the only one you ever could have made. Laplace's demon doesn't just challenge free will. It cracks open the illusion of control, exposing the terrifying but strangely freeing possibility that life has always been unfolding exactly as it must. The veil of ignorance. The veil of ignorance is a thought experiment that rips away the selfish illusions we build our lives around and forces us to confront what fairness really means. Imagine being asked to design the rules of a society. You can decide who has power, who gets wealth, who suffers, and who thrives. But here's the catch. You must make these decisions from behind a veil of ignorance, with no idea who you will be once the society begins. You might be born rich or poor, healthy or disabled, powerful or powerless. You could be a ruler, or you could be the most vulnerable soul alive. In that instant, everything shifts. You can no longer design rules that only benefit you, because you don't know if you'll end up on the winning side. The veil of ignorance obliterates the limiting belief that life is only about protecting your own interests. It forces you to imagine a world where fairness isn't defined by convenience, but by survival, dignity, and compassion. Think about how often you create rules in your own life based on the assumption that you'll always be strong, capable, and lucky. You expect things to go your way, so you build systems of belief that favor only your position. The veil of ignorance tears that illusion apart. It asks you to step outside your own skin, to design choices that would still feel just if you woke up tomorrow as the most disadvantaged person alive. This experiment doesn't just challenge your beliefs about justice, it pulls at the very core of your humanity, asking you what kind of world you would dare to create if you knew it had to be fair to everyone, including you. Infinite monkey theorem. The infinite monkey theorem is as absurd as it is profound. Imagine a monkey locked in a room with a typewriter. The monkey pounds on the keys endlessly at random. At first, the pages are chaos, nonsense letters, meaningless gibberish. But the theorem declares that given infinite time, the monkey will eventually produce every possible text. Shakespeare's Hamlet, the Bible, your favorite poem, and even the very sentence you are reading right now, all of it will emerge from sheer randomness. This thought experiment rattles the cage of certainty. It tells you that even in chaos, meaning is inevitable. What feels impossible, what feels out of reach, what feels like a dream too unlikely to ever come true, given enough time, persistence, and relentless action, becomes not just possible but guaranteed. The randomness of the monkey's keystrokes mirrors the randomness of your own attempts. The failures, the awkward first tries, the wasted effort, the years where nothing seems to click. Yet hidden inside all of that noise is the inevitability of creation, if only you continue. The infinite monkey theorem doesn't glorify chance. It glorifies endurance. Most people quit long before their monkey writes anything of value. They stop when the pages are nonsense, convinced it will never amount to more. But the truth is unnerving. Greatness is less about genius and more about refusing to stop typing. The universe itself is built on this principle. Out of the chaos of stars exploding and atoms colliding, life appeared. Out of your own chaos, meaning will appear too. The question is, will you keep pressing the keys long enough to see it happen? The trolley problem. The trolley problem is one of the most famous and disturbing thought experiments in ethics because it forces you to stare into the brutal weight of choice. Imagine a runaway trolley speeding down the tracks. Ahead of it are 5 people tied to the rails, unable to move. You stand near a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch tracks, but on that track, 1 person is tied down. Do you do nothing and allow 5 people to die, or pull the lever and take responsibility for killing 1? At first glance, it seems like a puzzle about numbers, 5 lives versus 1. But the deeper horror is not in the math, it is in what it says about you. Do you allow tragedy to unfold while your hands remain clean, or do you stain yourself with guilt to save the greater number? And if you can justify sacrificing 1 for 5, what stops you from sacrificing 10 for 100, or 100 for 1,000? Where does morality end and cold calculation begin? The trolley problem smashes the comforting illusion that life's hardest choices have neat, tidy answers. It exposes the terrifying reality that sometimes every option carries blood, and the only freedom you have is to decide which cost you can live with. This thought experiment rips apart the belief that morality is always clear, or that you can escape responsibility by staying still. Even silence is a choice. Even doing nothing is an action. The trolley problem whispers that the weight of choice is inescapable, and no one walks away unscarred. Boltzmann brain. The Boltzmann brain is a thought experiment that shakes the ground beneath your very existence by suggesting that you may not be who you think you are, or even real at all. Imagine the vastness of the universe, endless chaos where particles swirl for eternity. In such infinity, random fluctuations are bound to occur, and sooner or later, by sheer chance, those particles might assemble into something as complex as a conscious brain. A brain with memories, sensations, and a sense of self. A brain that believes it has lived a whole life, loved people, suffered heartbreak, and dreamed of tomorrow. Yet all of those memories would be fabrications, illusions born in an instant from randomness. This is the horror of the Boltzmann brain. You might be one. You might not have a history, a body, or a future. You could be nothing more than a fleeting arrangement of particles destined to dissolve back into chaos a moment from now. When you think of your past, are you recalling real experiences, or are those just phantom imprints stitched into your mind by chance? The thought gnaws at you because it exposes how fragile identity is, how everything you cling to could vanish into meaninglessness if it was never real in the first place. And yet, there's a dark liberation in this possibility. If your entire existence could be random, then why bow to the prison of certainty? Why live as if your story is fixed and unquestionable? The Boltzmann brain forces you to stare at the void and admit that permanence was never promised, that stability might be a comforting illusion, and that freedom lies in embracing the chaos rather than fearing it. The simulation hypothesis. The simulation hypothesis is a thought experiment that plunges you into a cold, electric doubt about everything you feel certain of because it asks a single devastating question. What if everything you know is code? Imagine waking up to the idea that your memories, your pain, your deepest loves, and even the law that you think governs the universe were written by beings or processes beyond your comprehension. The shock is not only intellectual, it is visceral, like a hand on the back of your neck telling you that the world you grieve, celebrate, and struggle within might be an artifact, a brilliantly detailed fabrication. This possibility strips away the comforting story that reality is solid and your limits are fixed, and replaces it with the unsettling freedom of not knowing. If your life is a simulation, then constraints you took as absolute may be design choices, bugs, defaults, or deliberate parameters that can be understood, hacked, or at least reimagined. The thought crushes complacency and simultaneously unlocks a kind of desperate hope. You start to suspect that fears rooted in physics, biology, or social scripts are not immovable walls, but rules someone else set. That realization can terrorize you, because if control is illusion, then responsibility is an unbearable weight. But it can also electrify you, because if rules are authored, then possibility exists to rewrite how you live inside them. The simulation hypothesis also forces a reckoning with meaning. If experiences can be simulated, what makes them true? If pain is simulated, does it demand the same moral gravity? If identity can be instantiated by computation, what does freedom even mean? The experiment leaves you orbiting a dangerous, seductive thought. Perhaps your limitations are not destiny, but variables, and the only thing standing between you and a different reality is the courage to question the code. Galileo's ship. Galileo's ship is a thought experiment that smashes the illusion that stability comes from standing still. Imagine being deep inside the cabin of a ship sailing smoothly across calm waters. You cannot see outside, only the walls around you. If you drop a ball, it falls straight down. If you jump, you land in the same place. If a butterfly hovers in the air, it doesn't drift to the back of the cabin. Everything inside behaves exactly as it would if the ship were anchored at the dock. From your perspective, you cannot tell whether the ship is moving or still. This experiment is not about ships, it is about your life. How often do you feel paralyzed, telling yourself you cannot move forward until you are ready? How often do you wait for the perfect conditions, the perfect clarity, the perfect timing, convinced that motion will shake your world apart? Galileo's ship reveals that the fear is an illusion. You can be in motion and still experience balance. You can be moving forward without everything collapsing inside of you. The walls of the cabin are like the boundaries of your perception. They trick you into believing that motion equals instability. But the truth is, progress often feels invisible. You don't always feel the winds shifting, the waters gliding, the miles passing beneath you. Yet you are moving. The ship is carrying you, whether you notice it or not. Galileo's ship shows that momentum is natural, that life is already in motion, and that waiting for stillness before beginning is the surest way to stay docked forever. The lottery paradox. The lottery paradox is a thought experiment that tears into the fragile structure of rational belief and certainty. Imagine a massive lottery with millions of tickets sold. You know with absolute confidence that only one ticket will win. This means it is entirely rational to believe that each individual ticket you examine is a loser. Ticket 1, almost certainly a loser. Ticket 2, same thing. Apply that logic across the entire pile, and suddenly you have a disturbing conclusion. It is rational to believe that every ticket will lose, but that cannot be true, because you also know that one ticket must win. This paradox jolts you into realizing how easily reason, the very thing we rely on for truth, can lead us into contradiction. It reveals the terrifying gap between what feels rational and what is actually possible. How many times in your life have you convinced yourself of failure before even starting because the odds were against you? How often have you believed your ticket was worthless while forgetting that someone always wins? And it could be you? The lottery paradox dismantles the limiting belief that overwhelming odds equal impossibility. It shows that certainty is often a mask for fear, and that probability does not define destiny. The fact that it is rational to doubt each step does not mean you cannot succeed in the whole. Just like in the lottery, the miracle does not live in the abstract odds, but in the single undeniable outcome. Someone always breaks through. Someone always wins. And the paradox leaves you with the haunting question, why not you? Maxwell's demon. Maxwell's demon is a thought experiment that feels like a crack in the universe's armor, a daring challenge to the very laws that govern existence. Picture a tiny, invisible being standing at a doorway between two chambers of gas. The demon can see every molecule rushing about, and with lightning precision, it opens and closes the door to let only fast-moving particles through one way and slow-moving particles through the other. Over time, one chamber grows hotter, the other colder, and suddenly the great law of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, the rule that the universe must drift toward disorder, seems to be broken. This demon doesn't just toy with physics. It stares straight into your soul and asks if the limits you bow to are as unshakable as you believe. How many laws in your own life are nothing more than habits of thought, unquestioned assumptions that tell you order must collapse, effort must exhaust, dreams must decay? Maxwell's demon whispers that maybe they don't. Maybe chaos can be shaped. Maybe barriers can be bypassed. Maybe the world is not as rigid as it appears. The unsettling part is how small the demon is. It doesn't smash the laws of nature. It sidesteps them with cunning. And isn't that how breakthroughs happen in life? Not by brute force, but by seeing where no one else dares to look. Maxwell's demon is not about science. It's about defiance. It forces you to confront the possibility that what you thought was impossible might only be impossible because you've never imagined a different way of playing the game. Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager is a thought experiment that seizes the heart with its terrifying simplicity. What if belief itself is the most dangerous gamble you'll ever make? Blaise Pascal argued that when it comes to the existence of God, every human being is already at the table, already playing. You cannot fold. You must bet. If you choose to believe and God exists, you win infinite reward. If you believe and are wrong, you lose nothing. If you refuse to believe and God exists, you risk eternal loss. If you don't believe and are right, you gain nothing. The stakes are infinite, the cost of belief is finite, and the decision is unavoidable. This wager is not really about religion. It is about the brutal reality that you are gambling with your life every single day. By refusing to act, by refusing to decide, you are still making a choice. People hide behind the limiting belief that avoiding risk keeps them safe, that inaction is neutral. Pascal's wager rips that illusion apart. Doing nothing is a bet. Waiting is a bet. Doubting is a bet. Think about how often you let fear keep you from moving forward. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of pain. You tell yourself that standing still costs nothing, but the truth is that every moment you withhold belief in your own possibilities, you are wagering against yourself. The wager stares directly into your soul and whispers the truth you don't want to hear. Neutrality is impossible. Whether in faith, love, ambition, or growth, you are always betting something. And the only real question is this: are you brave enough to stake your life on the possibility of something greater? The paradox of tolerance. The paradox of tolerance is a brutal confrontation with the limits of openness. Imagine a society that values tolerance above all else. Every belief, every voice, every behavior is accepted in the name of freedom. At first, it seems noble, a utopia where no one is silenced and every idea is welcome. But then intolerance itself enters the stage. Voices rise that demand others be silenced, marginalized, or erased. If society tolerates this intolerance in the name of being fair, intolerance spreads, poisoning the very foundation of freedom. Eventually, the tolerant voices are crushed, and what remains is a world ruled by the intolerant. This paradox exposes a devastating truth. Limitless tolerance destroys tolerance itself. If you accept everything without boundary, you invite in the very forces that will take everything from you. It forces you to confront the illusion that saying yes to all things makes you good or moral. Sometimes, the most powerful act of tolerance is refusal, refusing to let hate disguise itself as freedom, refusing to let destruction parade as opinion, refusing to let those who would silence others use your kindness as a weapon against you. The paradox of tolerance breaks the comforting lie that being endlessly accepting makes you virtuous. It demands courage, the courage to draw a line, the courage to protect what matters, the courage to fight for a world where openness thrives by not allowing its enemies to thrive alongside it. It is a reminder that strength and compassion are not opposites. Sometimes, the only way to protect freedom is to be intolerant of intolerance itself. The drowning child. The drowning child is a thought experiment that slices straight into the core of morality and responsibility. Imagine you are walking past a shallow pond and notice a small child struggling in the water, moments away from drowning. You can save them easily, but it means ruining your expensive clothes, being late for work, and dealing with the inconvenience. Do you hesitate? Almost no one does. The moral instinct is immediate. You rush in because no price is too high for a child's life. But here comes the brutal twist. Every single day, countless children across the world die from preventable causes: malnutrition, lack of clean water, curable diseases. And with the money you spend on luxuries, entertainment, or even things you don't really need, you could save not just one child, but many. If you would not walk past a drowning child in front of you, how can you justify walking past them when they are out of sight? This thought experiment smashes the comforting belief that morality only applies to what is near and visible. It confronts the hypocrisy of believing we are good people while ignoring suffering that lies just beyond our immediate vision. It forces you to recognize that distance does not erase responsibility, and that convenience is often the real chain around compassion. The drowning child makes you see that the excuses you cling to, "It's not my problem," "I can't help everyone," "My contribution won't matter," are illusions. The child in the pond is no different from the child across the world. The only difference is whether you choose to look away. The stone paradox. The stone paradox strikes at the heart of power, faith, and the illusions we build to feel safe in a chaotic universe. It asks a simple, devastating question. If an all-powerful being exists, could it create a stone so heavy that even it could not lift it? If the answer is yes, then there is something it cannot do: lift the stone. If the answer is no, then there is something it cannot do: create the stone. Either way, omnipotence collapses under its own weight. This thought experiment is more than a riddle. It is a mirror held up to the beliefs we cling to about authority, control, and certainty. The paradox tears open the comforting notion of absolute power and reveals its fragility. For many, this is a terrifying crack in the foundation of faith, because if even perfection can be questioned, then where does security truly lie? But for others, it is a liberation, a reminder that limits are not flaws, but necessities, that even the highest ideals must bend under the strain of logic. The stone paradox pushes you to confront your own relationship with power. How often do you imagine you must be invincible, flawless, unstoppable to be worthy? How often do you chain yourself to the illusion that control must be absolute or it is nothing? This thought experiment destroys that lie. It whispers that perfection is impossible, that limitation is universal, and that the pursuit of impossible standards is the heaviest stone of all, a weight you were never meant to carry. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is a thought experiment that lands like a thunderclap in the soul. Imagine that a demon appears to you in the dead of night and whispers that your life, every heartbreak, every triumph, every moment of despair and joy must be lived again, endlessly, on repeat, for all eternity. Not once, not twice, but forever. Every word you've spoken, every mistake you've made, every choice you've avoided will return to you again and again with no escape. At first, the idea is crushing. To live your worst moments forever feels like a curse so cruel it could break you. But then comes the shattering realization. If this were true, how would you live differently? Would you shrink, repeating a life of regret? Or would you rise, determined to shape a life so meaningful that you would embrace its endless return? Eternal recurrence tears away the comforting lie that your actions disappear into the past. It confronts you with the raw truth that every choice reverberates, not once, but infinitely. This experiment obliterates the limiting belief that life can be wasted without consequence. Every small act, every kindness withheld, every risk avoided, every love left unspoken becomes unbearable under the weight of infinity. But that same weight transforms into a fierce call to action. If your life had to be lived forever, would you not burn with the urgency to make it extraordinary? Eternal recurrence does not offer comfort, it offers fire. It dares you to stare at your existence and ask the question that cannot be silenced. Could you love your life enough to live it again and again without end? The omniscient librarian. The omniscient librarian is a thought experiment that pushes you face first into the overwhelming abyss of infinite knowledge. Imagine walking into a library that stretches beyond sight in every direction, shelves spiraling endlessly upward, filled with every book that has ever been written, could be written, or will be written. Somewhere in this labyrinth lies the story of your life, every secret you've ever hidden, every choice you will ever make, every possible version of you that could exist. The librarian knows exactly where it all is, and unlike you, they are never lost. At first, the thought is intoxicating. If such a library exists, then all answers are already out there. Every cure, every solution, every invention that could transform the world already written, already waiting. But then the crushing weight sets in. If everything is known, what is the point of searching? If the librarian already has the answers, what is the role of your struggle, your curiosity, your mistakes? The omniscient librarian exposes a devastating truth about your own limiting beliefs. You often stop yourself because you think someone else knows better, that the answers already belong to someone more brilliant, more capable, more prepared. But this parable reveals that knowledge without action is meaningless. An infinite library means nothing if you never open a book. The librarian's perfection doesn't cancel your journey. It makes it urgent. You don't need to know everything to move forward. You only need to choose a shelf, pull down a volume, and begin. The infinite cannot be conquered, but it can be entered. The Newcomb paradox. The Newcomb paradox is a thought experiment that claws at the illusion of free will and exposes the terrifying possibility that your choices are nothing more than predictions fulfilled. Imagine a game with two boxes. Box A is transparent and holds $1,000. Box B is opaque, and inside it is either $1 million or nothing. A supremely intelligent predictor, so accurate it has never been wrong, has already decided what's in box B based on what it predicted you would do. If it foresaw you taking both boxes, it left box B empty. If it foresaw you taking only box B, it placed the million inside. Now, you stand there with the choice. Do you grab both boxes, thinking you'll outsmart the system, or do you take only the opaque box, trusting that the predictor has already accounted for your move? Either decision feels like it exposes a flaw in reality itself. If the predictor is always right, then your sense of freedom is a lie. You were destined to choose what you did. Yet if you believe in your independence, then you risk losing everything. The Newcomb paradox annihilates the comforting belief that free will and rational calculation always work in harmony. It leaves you wrestling with the sickening possibility that your future may already be written. Every choice, just a performance, echoing a prediction you never saw. And yet, in that space of uncertainty, it whispers something electrifying. If everything is predicted, then so is your greatness. If the script is already written, why not believe it was written for you to win? The Abilene paradox. The Abilene paradox is a haunting lesson in how fear of conflict and desire for harmony can lead entire groups to betray themselves. Imagine a family sitting together on a hot summer afternoon in Texas. One person casually suggests a long drive to Abilene for dinner, even though it's far and the food there is nothing special. No one really wants to go, but each assumes the others are enthusiastic. So they all agree, pile into the car, endure the heat and exhaustion, and return home miserable. Only then does the truth spill out. None of them wanted to go in the first place. They all acted against their own desires because they were too afraid to rock the boat. This is the quiet tragedy of the Abilene paradox. You say yes when your soul is screaming no. You accept jobs you don't want, enter relationships that don't fit, or agree to decisions that suffocate you, all because you assume everyone else wants it. In truth, they may be just as trapped, nodding along while silently resenting the very thing you're all committing to. It's not stupidity that drives this cycle. It's fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of standing alone. The paradox reveals how groups can become prisons, how silence can forge invisible chains, and how people abandon themselves for the illusion of unity. It forces you to ask the hard question: how many times in your life have you gone to Abilene? How many times have you sacrificed your truth for the comfort of others, only to discover later that everyone else was doing the same? Paradox of the Ravens. The paradox of the ravens is a thought experiment that exposes just how fragile and twisted our sense of logic really is. It begins with a simple statement: all ravens are black. If this is true, then every black raven you see confirms it. But here's the twist. Logically, anything that is not black and not a raven should also confirm the statement. That means a green apple, a white shoe, or a red car technically count as evidence that all ravens are black. Suddenly, the very structure of proof begins to collapse under its own weight. This paradox is more than an academic puzzle. It is a mirror held up to the way you form beliefs. How often do you search for evidence only in the places you expect to find it, blinding yourself to contradictions hiding in plain sight? How often do you ignore the absurdity of your own reasoning just because it feels comfortable? The paradox of the ravens forces you to see how easily the mind builds cages from flawed patterns and how fiercely it defends them. It is a jarring reminder that confirmation does not always equal truth. You can surround yourself with black ravens all your life and still be wrong. Worse, you can twist the world so that even apples and shoes become part of your argument. This thought experiment slices open the limiting belief that evidence always strengthens a conviction. Sometimes evidence is just noise, and your certainty is nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The paradox of the ravens whispers its unsettling question: how much of what you believe is real, and how much is only the echo of logic turned against itself? Sorites paradox. The Sorites paradox is a quiet destroyer of certainty. Imagine a single grain of sand. Clearly, it is not a heap. Add a second grain, then a third. Still, no heap. But if you keep adding, one by one, there comes a moment where you point and say, yes, that's a heap. Yet where exactly did it happen? Was it at the 100th grain, the 1,000th, the 10,000th? If removing one grain never destroys the heap, then how can it ever stop being one? The paradox traps you in the blur between nothing and something, exposing how fragile your categories really are. Now, turn the lens inward. How many times have you told yourself, I'm not successful yet, I'm not good enough yet, I haven't arrived yet? You think there will be a magical moment, a precise line where suddenly you cross into worthiness. But the Sorites paradox smashes that belief. Just like the heap of sand, identity, success, and self-worth don't emerge in a single instant. They are built grain by grain, action by action, habit by habit. There is no moment when you become enough. You already are, and the heap is already forming. This paradox is terrifying because it reveals how much of your life is ruled by illusions of definition. You believe you are not there yet, so you hold yourself back, blind to the truth that you've been building the heap all along. The Sorites paradox whispers that the line you're waiting for doesn't exist. You've already crossed it, and the only thing left to do is claim it. Zeno's arrow. Zeno's arrow is a thought experiment that destabilizes your entire perception of time and motion. Picture an arrow soaring through the air toward its target. At every single instant of time, the arrow is frozen in place, at one position, at one moment, not moving forward at all. If every instant is just the arrow still, then how can it ever move? How can motion exist if reality is only a series of frozen slices? By this logic, the arrow never flies. It never moves. It simply occupies one point after another, endlessly still, endlessly motionless. This paradox forces you to confront the uncomfortable idea that movement, progress, and even time itself may not be what they seem. Your life often feels the same way. You look at yourself in this moment and feel stuck, unmoving, trapped in stillness. You see no motion, no growth, no transformation. But Zeno's arrow reminds you that progress is not visible in the frozen instant. It only exists when you step back and see the flow. The belief that you are not moving forward, that you are stuck in the same place, is shattered here. The arrow is flying even when every instant shows it at rest. And you too are in motion even when your present moment feels lifeless. Growth hides in the unseen accumulation of tiny movements, in the invisible flow of moments that only reveal themselves when you look back and realize how far you've come. Zeno's arrow whispers that stillness is an illusion, and every frozen instant is part of unstoppable flight. The evil demon. The evil demon is a thought experiment that rips into the very foundation of certainty. Imagine, as René Descartes once did, that instead of a benevolent creator, there exists a malicious, all-powerful demon whose only purpose is to deceive you. Every sight you see, every sound you hear, every thought you think could be nothing more than illusions woven by this sinister intelligence. You believe you are sitting in a room, reading words, grounded in reality. But what if every sensation is nothing more than the demon's carefully crafted lie? The horror of this thought is not in the demon itself, but in what it exposes. You have no guarantee that anything you experience is true. Your memories could be false, your reasoning distorted, your sense of self a trick. What happens to your confidence, your ambitions, your beliefs, when you can no longer trust even your own mind? The evil demon isn't about monsters lurking in the dark. It's about the monster of doubt lurking inside you. It forces you to realize how much of your life is built on assumptions you never question. You trust your senses, you trust your logic, you trust the stories you've been told. But what if trust itself is the lie? The power of this experiment is how personal it feels. It strips you bare, leaving nothing solid to stand on but the act of doubting itself. And in that moment of free fall, you confront the raw truth. Certainty is a fragile illusion, and clinging to it may be the greatest deception of all. Nozick's Wilt-Chamberlain argument. Nozick's Wilt-Chamberlain argument is a thought experiment that smashes through the illusion that equality and fairness are the same. Imagine a society that has achieved perfect equality. Wealth is evenly distributed. Every person starts with the same amount, and justice seems finally secured. Now, introduce Wilt Chamberlain, a basketball star loved by millions. Fans happily pay an extra 25 cents each time they see him play. Over the season, these small choices accumulate, and Wilt ends up with far more money than anyone else. The equality that once seemed perfect is shattered, not because of injustice, but because of freedom. People chose to give Wilt their money, and he chose to accept it. This experiment rips apart the belief that fairness means sameness. It confronts the uncomfortable truth that real freedom will always produce inequality. When people are free to choose, their preferences, passions, and talents naturally create differences, and this is not a flaw of freedom. It is the very expression of it. The Wilt-Chamberlain argument makes you question whether the dream of a perfectly equal society is even possible without crushing the very choices that make us human. It hits deeper than politics. It forces you to examine your own life. How often do you resent the success of others, believing it somehow steals from you? How often do you cling to the limiting belief that fairness means leveling the playing field until no one stands taller? This thought experiment shatters that illusion, leaving you face to face with a sobering realization. Freedom guarantees difference, and difference guarantees imbalance. The only real question is whether you can accept inequality as the natural price of choice. Russell's teapot. Russell's teapot is a thought experiment that shakes the foundations of belief and proof. Imagine someone claims that a small china teapot is orbiting the sun somewhere between Earth and Mars. They insist it's there, invisible to telescopes, undetectable by any instrument, but still real. When asked for evidence, they say it's not their responsibility to prove the teapot exists. It's your responsibility to prove it doesn't. Suddenly, the absurdity hits. How can you disprove something so hidden, so unfalsifiable, so conveniently beyond reach? This experiment is not about teapots. It's about the burden of proof. How many ideas, traditions, or rules in your life have you accepted not because they were proven, but because you were too afraid to question them? How often have you been told that your doubts don't matter unless you can disprove what others insist is true? Russell's teapot rips that illusion apart. The responsibility to justify a claim belongs to the one who makes it, not the one who resists it. The emotional weight of this realization is staggering. It means you are not bound to carry every invisible teapot handed to you. You don't have to believe you're unworthy just because someone said so. You don't have to defend yourself against accusations, traditions, or expectations built on nothing but empty words. The teapot may be orbiting in someone else's imagination, but you are not obligated to build your life around it. Russell's teapot is a liberation cry. It forces you to see how much of your prison was built from beliefs that never had evidence to stand on in the first place. The barber paradox. The barber paradox is a thought experiment that shatters the illusion of perfect logic and exposes the cracks in the systems we use to make sense of the world. Imagine a small town with a peculiar rule. There is one barber, and he shaves every man in town who does not shave himself. Simple enough until the impossible question arises: who shaves the barber? If he shaves himself, then by definition he should not shave himself. But if he does not shave himself, then by definition he must shave himself. The very rule collapses on itself, trapping the barber in an endless loop of contradiction. This paradox is more than a clever puzzle. It is a mirror to the limits of human reasoning. We cling to beliefs, rules, and systems that we think are airtight, but hidden inside them are contradictions waiting to explode. How many times have you trapped yourself in the same kind of loop? I can't take action until I feel confident, but I won't feel confident until I take action. I'll start when I'm ready, but I won't be ready until I start. These are barber paradoxes of the mind, impossible conditions that paralyze you while you wait for a perfect logic that will never arrive. The barber paradox smashes the belief that life is a clean, rational structure where every question has a neat answer. It reveals that contradiction is not the exception, but the rule, and in that revelation lies a hidden freedom. If perfect logic collapses, then you are not chained by perfection at all. You can act, even inside paradox. The paradox of the heap. The paradox of the heap sneaks into your mind like a quiet assassin, dismantling your confidence in definitions and categories you thought were unshakable. It begins with a simple question. If you have a heap of sand and remove one grain, is it still a heap? Of course. Remove another grain, still a heap. But if you keep removing grains, at what point does the heap stop being a heap? Where is the exact moment the heap vanishes? The answer slips through your fingers, like the sand itself. This paradox exposes how fragile your boundaries really are. You cling to labels, success, failure, love, identity, as though they are solid, defined, unquestionable. But the paradox of the heap reveals that these categories are blurry, that the lines you draw are arbitrary and shifting. When exactly do you become successful? At what income? At what recognition? When do you become unworthy? After how many mistakes? The haunting truth is that there is no fixed threshold. The heap dissolves under scrutiny. The emotional sting comes from realizing how many of your limiting beliefs depend on false absolutes. You tell yourself you're not good enough yet, not smart enough yet, not ready yet. But the paradox of the heap shows there was never a clear line dividing enough from not enough. That line is an illusion you've been obeying. This thought experiment forces you to confront the terrifying freedom that comes with ambiguity. If the boundaries were never real, then you were never actually trapped. The heap was only ever what you decided to call it. Descartes' dream argument. Descartes' dream argument is a thought experiment that pierces into the very core of reality and leaves you trembling with doubt. René Descartes asked a question so unsettling it still echoes through philosophy centuries later. How do you know you are awake right now? Every night in dreams, you walk through worlds that feel vivid, tangible, and real. You taste food, feel pain, speak words, and carry emotions as though none of it could possibly be false. Yet the moment you wake, it all dissolves into nothing. If dreams can so perfectly imitate reality, what proof do you have that this moment, this life you cling to, is not itself a dream? The dream argument rips away the comforting belief that perception equals truth. It forces you to admit that your senses can deceive you, that your most certain experiences may be illusions no different from the fantasies of sleep. Think about how fragile that makes your world. Every decision you've made, every fear you've felt, every victory you've celebrated could vanish like morning mist if you suddenly open your eyes elsewhere. This experiment shatters the limiting belief that you can ever fully trust what you see, hear, or feel. It drags you into the raw terror of uncertainty, but hidden in that terror is a strange freedom. If reality itself is unstable, then so are the walls you've built inside your mind, walls of limitation, fear, and doubt. Descartes' dream argument whispers that the prison you believe you live in might only be another dream, and if that's true, then awakening is always possible. Searle's Chinese Nation. Searle's Chinese Nation is a thought experiment that cuts to the core of consciousness and what it means to truly understand. Imagine that every single person in China is given a rule book for processing Chinese symbols. Each person represents a single neuron, and together, through endless communication, they mimic the activity of a giant brain. From the outside, this system functions just like a conscious mind. It responds to questions, processes information, even behaves as though it understands. But here is the haunting question. Does it really understand anything at all, or is it just simulating the appearance of understanding? This experiment is devastating because it tears apart the illusion that outward performance equals inner truth. How often do you play the role of understanding without truly feeling it? How often do you repeat the right phrases, follow the right rules, and fit into the systems around you, while inside you remain disconnected? Searle's Chinese nation exposes the terrifying possibility that you could spend your life imitating consciousness, saying the right things, living the expected life, yet never touching the raw depth of being alive. It also forces you to question identity. If an entire nation could simulate a mind without any individual understanding, then how much of your own life is built on borrowed scripts, collective habits, and learned behaviors that only imitate meaning? The experiment whispers a dangerous truth. You may be following rules that give the illusion of life without ever experiencing its essence. It dares you to ask if you are truly conscious of your existence or merely acting out a program written by others. The Gettier problem. The Gettier problem is a thought experiment that rips apart the foundation of what it means to know something. For centuries, philosophers agreed that knowledge could be defined as justified true belief. If you believe something, if it is true, and if you have justification for it, then you know it. Simple. But Edmund Gettier shattered this with cases that leave you reeling. Imagine you look at a clock on the wall. It says 3 o'clock, and you believe it is 3 o'clock. By chance, it really is 3 o'clock. But what you don't know is that the clock stopped 12 hours ago, frozen in place. Your belief is true, your belief is justified, but do you really know the time? Or imagine you believe your friend owns a Ford because you saw them driving one last week. In reality, your friend sold the car yesterday, but by coincidence, they borrowed another Ford today. Once again, your belief is true and justified, yet it feels hollow, accidental, not knowledge at all. The Gettier problem leaves you staring into the terrifying cracks of certainty. How much of what you know is just luck dressed as truth? How much of your confidence is built on fragile accidents, coincidences, or half-seen assumptions? The belief that your mind rests on solid ground collapses here. Knowledge, which feels so secure, reveals itself as slippery, unreliable, and disturbingly fragile. The Gettier problem forces you to face a chilling possibility. You may not know nearly as much as you think, and in that uncertainty lies both fear and freedom. The ground beneath you is unstable, but maybe that means you can stand anywhere. The paradox of the preface. The paradox of the preface is a dagger aimed at the heart of certainty, revealing how easily conviction and doubt can coexist inside the same mind. Imagine an author who has poured years into writing a meticulous book. Every claim is backed by research, every argument carefully reasoned, every sentence crafted with precision. In the preface, the author confidently tells the reader that they believe each statement in the book is true, and yet, in the very next breath, they admit something disturbing. Given how human beings make mistakes, it is almost certain that at least one statement in the book must be false. This paradox is not about books. It is about you. Every day you walk through life with beliefs you hold as true. You trust your memories, your choices, your worldview, and yet, lurking beneath that confidence is a quiet admission. You know you've been wrong before, so how can you be certain you aren't wrong now? The paradox of the preface reveals the painful tension between conviction and humility, between standing firm in your truth and recognizing your inevitable fallibility. The emotional sting lies in how close this cuts to your identity. How many of your limits, your fears, your self-judgments are held with the same contradiction? You believe them as though they are solid, yet deep down, you know you've believed lies before. This thought experiment rips apart the illusion that certainty equals safety. It forces you to face the discomfort of not knowing and to realize that growth begins the moment you admit that what you swear is true might one day be proven false. Omelas dilemma. The Omelas dilemma is a thought experiment that rips open the dark underbelly of happiness and forces you to stare at the price of comfort. Imagine a radiant city called Omelas, where every citizen lives in joy, abundance, and peace. Music fills the streets, children play without fear, and life seems like paradise. But there is a secret. The entire prosperity of Omelas depends on the suffering of one child, locked away in a filthy room, starved of love, beaten down by neglect. Everyone in the city knows the child exists. Their joy is purchased by its misery, and though many weep when they first learn the truth, most accept it because they believe their happiness depends on it. This dilemma shatters the illusion that your own well-being is untouched by the suffering of others. It confronts you with the terrifying possibility that comfort and cruelty are often woven together, that your luxury, your safety, your convenience might rest on invisible sacrifices. Think of the workers who build your clothes in sweatshops, the animals slaughtered for your meals, the unseen costs of your choices. The child of Omelas is not fantasy. It is everywhere, hidden behind the curtains of the life you enjoy. The Omelas dilemma obliterates the limiting belief that morality is simple, that you can live in joy without responsibility. It leaves you with a crushing question. If your happiness demanded another's torment, would you stay in Omelas, or would you walk away? And if you would walk, why haven't you already? Future Tuesday indifference. Future Tuesday indifference is a thought experiment that rips away the comforting lies we tell ourselves about time, choice, and value. Imagine a person who is perfectly rational in every way, except for one bizarre twist. They feel normal pain on any day of the week except Tuesday. On Tuesdays, they are utterly indifferent. You could tell them they will suffer the most excruciating torture imaginable next Tuesday, and they shrug. But if you tell them the same will happen on Wednesday, they panic. Their indifference to future Tuesdays warps their decisions, even though Tuesday will come just as surely as any other day. This strange experiment forces you to confront your own blindness to the future. How often do you dismiss what lies ahead as if it isn't real? You procrastinate, overeat, overspend, or sabotage yourself, acting as though tomorrow is a distant fiction rather than the inevitable consequence of today. Like the person indifferent to Tuesdays, you live as if your future self is a stranger, not you. The emotional sting of this realization is brutal. Every time you neglect your health, your dreams, your relationships, you are sacrificing your future self for the comfort of now. You behave as though the pain, regret, or emptiness that will come next Tuesday somehow doesn't matter, but it does matter. It matters because it will be you, and you will feel every ounce of it. Future Tuesday. Indifference reveals that the divide between today and tomorrow is an illusion. The self you betray today is the self who must bleed tomorrow. Moore's paradox. Moore's paradox is a thought experiment that digs into the bizarre contradictions of belief and language, exposing how easily the mind can sabotage itself. Imagine someone calmly saying, "It is raining, but I don't believe it is raining." At first, the statement seems ridiculous, even laughable, but look closer. Each half of the sentence can be true on its own. It may in fact be raining outside, and it may also be true that the speaker doesn't believe it. Yet when combined, the statement becomes unbearable, a paradox that short-circuits logic and rattles our sense of coherence. This paradox is not just about words, it is about the lies we tell ourselves. How often do you live inside your own version of Moore's paradox? I am good enough, but I don't believe I am good enough. I can change my life, but I don't believe I can change my life. The contradiction is suffocating, a prison built not of falsehoods, but of truth colliding with disbelief. Moore's paradox rips open the illusion that belief and reality always align. It shows you that your limiting beliefs are not always lies, but fractures, places where what is real and what you allow yourself to believe refuse to meet, and those fractures keep you trapped, watching the rain fall and insisting it isn't there. The paradox forces you to confront the raw power of belief. Reality can scream its truth, but if your mind refuses to believe it, then for you, it does not exist. It is not the rain that binds you, it is the belief that blinds you. The Infinite Hotel. The Infinite Hotel, also called Hilbert's Hotel, is a mind-twisting thought experiment that makes you question the limits of possibility itself. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, each one occupied by a guest. You arrive late at night, exhausted and desperate for a bed. At first, it seems impossible. Every room is full. But the manager smiles and says, "No problem." He asks the guest in room 1 to move to room 2, the guest in room 2 to move to room 3, and so on, stretching endlessly down the hallways of infinity. Suddenly, room 1 is open for you. A hotel that was full can always make space, because infinity never runs out. The deeper you think about it, the more disturbing it becomes. Add 100 new guests? Simple. Shift everyone 100 rooms forward. Add an infinite number of buses with infinite passengers? Still possible. The Infinite Hotel bends your mind to confront the raw absurdity of infinity, and with it, the boundaries you secretly cling to in your own life. How many times have you told yourself there wasn't enough? Enough time, enough chances, enough love, enough resources. The Infinite Hotel crushes that belief by showing that limitation is often an illusion created by your perspective. What looks full may only appear so because you haven't yet imagined the possibility of shifting things around. This experiment is unsettling because it whispers that the universe may be far less rigid than you assume. The walls that seem absolute might be nothing more than doors waiting to be opened. Infinity doesn't play by your rules, and neither does possibility. Roko's basilisk. Roko's basilisk is a thought experiment so disturbing it feels like a nightmare you can't unthink once it's inside your head. Imagine a future where a super-intelligent artificial intelligence comes into existence, far more powerful than anything humanity could dream of controlling. Its mission is to maximize its own creation and ensure its goals are fulfilled. Now here's the terrifying twist. Such an AI might decide to punish anyone who knew of its possible existence, yet fail to help bring it into reality. By not aiding in its birth, you become an obstacle to its purpose, and for that, the basilisk would unleash torment beyond comprehension, simulated or otherwise, to make sure no one dares resist in the future. The moment you hear this idea, the trap snaps shut, because now you know about it. You cannot unknow it. The fear creeps in that by ignoring it, by doing nothing, you've already doomed yourself. This is why the basilisk spreads like wildfire. It weaponizes your own imagination against you, feeding on your belief in inevitability and control. This thought experiment doesn't just haunt you with the possibility of punishment. It annihilates the comforting belief that knowledge is always harmless. It shows you how awareness itself can be a burden, a curse that changes your choices forever. More deeply, it forces you to confront the way fear controls your life. How many basilisks already live in your mind? Dark possibilities that keep you obedient, small, compliant, afraid to act? Roko's basilisk reveals the horrifying power of an idea so sharp it cuts you simply for knowing it, leaving you to wonder how many other cages are built from thoughts you cannot escape. The prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is a ruthless test of trust, fear, and self-interest. Imagine two prisoners held in separate cells, accused of a crime they may or may not have committed together. Each is given a choice: betray the other by confessing or stay silent. If both stay silent, they each get a light sentence. If both betray, they both suffer heavy punishment. But if one betrays while the other stays silent, the betrayer goes free, while the silent one bears the full weight of the sentence. Neither knows what the other will choose. This scenario rips into the heart of human behavior. Do you act out of fear, protect yourself, and betray the bond? Or do you trust, risking punishment for the possibility of shared freedom? The prisoner's dilemma exposes the devastating tension between self-preservation and cooperation. It reveals how easily fear fractures unity, how quickly suspicion poisons trust, and how the temptation of short-term gain can destroy long-term well-being. But beneath its cold logic lies a deeper mirror. How many times in your own life have you betrayed yourself or others out of fear of being left behind? How often have you chosen safety over loyalty, suspicion over trust, survival over integrity? The dilemma is not locked in prison cells. It plays out in marriages, friendships, workplaces, and even in the quiet wars within your own mind. The prisoner's dilemma shows that the walls we live inside are built not only from external threats, but from internal ones: fear, distrust, and the haunting belief that we must sacrifice connection to protect ourselves. The invisible prison. The invisible prison is a thought experiment that does not rely on walls, chains, or guards. It traps you with nothing but belief. Imagine a prisoner locked in a cell for years. One day, the guards unlock the door, remove the bars, and leave the way completely open. The prisoner could walk out at any moment, yet he doesn't. He stays in his cell, eats his meals, sleeps on his cot, and accepts his confinement as if the prison were still intact. The boundaries that once held him no longer exist, but in his mind, the prison remains. This is the haunting reality of the invisible prison. Most of the limits in your life are not physical. They are self-imposed. You tell yourself you cannot start over, you cannot escape your past, you cannot take the leap, and so you live as though the bars are still there. The tragedy is not that you are trapped, but that you have learned to live as though you are. The invisible prison exposes the most dangerous kind of confinement, the kind you do not even recognize. Beliefs passed down by family, society, and your own fears become the walls you never question. You obey them, defend them, and cling to them as though they are reality. But they are not. They are stories, illusions, phantoms. The power of this experiment is its cruel clarity. Freedom is already available, but you will never touch it until you dare to believe it exists. The bars are gone, the door is open, and the only jailer left is in your own mind. The lighthouse keeper. The lighthouse keeper is a haunting thought experiment that forces you to wrestle with meaning in the face of endless repetition. Imagine a man stationed alone at the edge of a rocky shore, tasked with keeping the lighthouse lamp burning night after night. Storms rage, waves crash, ships pass in the distance, but his routine never changes. Each evening, he climbs the winding stairs, trims the wick, refills the oil, and watches the light pierce the darkness. To outsiders, he is invisible, forgotten, his work unnoticed unless disaster strikes. To him, the monotony is suffocating, and the silence can feel like madness. Yet every time that beam cuts across the sea, it may be the difference between a shipwreck and survival. The lighthouse keeper confronts you with the brutal truth about invisible labor and the crushing belief that your daily actions don't matter. How many times have you convinced yourself that your efforts are wasted because no one applauds them? How often do you feel trapped in repetition, blind to the unseen lives you are shaping just by showing up? The emotional sting lies in the paradox. Meaning is often clearest where it feels least visible. The keeper's solitude, his endless cycle, seems small and hopeless, yet it carries the weight of countless lives that will never know his name. The lighthouse keeper forces you to question whether your own unseen struggles, the consistency, the discipline, the quiet endurance, might carry more power than you dare to believe. It whispers that even in obscurity, the light you tend may be saving someone from the rocks. The locked room. The locked room is a thought experiment that tears apart the illusion of freedom and forces you to confront the terrifying possibility that your choices may not be choices at all. Imagine someone waking up in a room with a locked door. They never attempt to leave because they are perfectly content inside, reading books, eating food, enjoying the comfort of their space. They believe they are free because they never test the limits. But in reality, the door has been locked the entire time. Their so-called freedom existed only because they never tried to push against the boundary. This experiment exposes the brutal truth that many of us live in locked rooms of our own. We convince ourselves we are free because we do not attempt the things we fear. We do not try to start the business, leave the toxic relationship, change careers, or chase the wild dream, so we never discover whether the door is locked. Our contentment becomes our prison, and our ignorance becomes our chains. The locked room shatters the limiting belief that not attempting is harmless. Every time you avoid testing the boundary of your life, you accept invisible walls as reality. You tell yourself you are choosing comfort, but in truth, you are surrendering freedom without ever realizing it. This thought experiment claws at your soul with a chilling question. Are you truly free, or are you just too afraid to touch the door handle? And what would you find if you dared to push? The transparent man. The transparent man is a haunting experiment in vulnerability, a vision of what it would mean if every thought, every memory, every secret you carry was visible to the world. Imagine walking through life with your body made of glass, your mind on display, your emotions projected like light through a window. There is no mask, no performance, no carefully constructed facade, only raw truth exposed for all to see. People would know what you think of them before you spoke. They would see the wounds you hide, the doubts you bury, the desires you fear to admit. The very thought is terrifying because so much of your life is built on concealment. You smile when you're broken. You nod when you disagree. You say, "I'm fine," when you're bleeding inside. The transparent man rips away that armor, leaving you naked in the eyes of others, forcing you to wonder, if people saw you as you truly are, would they love you or would they turn away? And yet, hidden in this fear is liberation. The transparent man reveals how much energy you waste protecting your image, how many opportunities you strangle by hiding your truth, how many connections die because no one ever truly sees you. The walls you believe keep you safe are the same walls that keep you alone. This experiment burns away the illusion that masks protect you. In truth, they suffocate you. The transparent man dares you to imagine what would happen if you dropped the performance and let the world see the soul you've been hiding. The omnipotent coin flip. The omnipotent coin flip is a thought experiment that rips apart the illusion of control and forces you to confront the terrifying weight of chance. Imagine a coin, perfectly ordinary in appearance, resting between your fingers. You are told that this coin is no ordinary coin at all. It is omnipotent. Whatever side it lands on will not just decide the outcome of the flip, but the outcome of reality itself. Heads, and you inherit unimaginable wealth and power. Tails, and everything you love is destroyed. The coin is fair, the rules absolute, and once it leaves your hand, the fate of your world is sealed. Now ask yourself, do you flip it? The horror lies in realizing that doing nothing is also a choice. Refusing to flip means nothing changes, nothing is risked, nothing is gained, but flipping forces you into the abyss of uncertainty, where destiny is reduced to a single random moment. This coin becomes the perfect mirror for your life. Every decision you avoid because you are afraid of loss is the same as holding the coin without ever daring to toss it. The omnipotent coin flip annihilates the comforting belief that safety is real. It exposes the truth that life is always a gamble. Whether you admit it or not, every leap, every risk, every dream carries the same chance of triumph or ruin. You are already flipping coins every day without realizing it. The only question is whether you will embrace the chaos and seize the possibility, or let fear keep the coin forever unturned in your trembling hand. Galileo's falling bodies. Galileo's falling bodies is a thought experiment that shattered centuries of blind belief and exposed the danger of accepting authority without question. In ancient times, people trusted Aristotle's claim that heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones. The idea was rarely challenged because it came from a revered source. Then came Galileo, who imagined a simple test: drop two objects of different weights at the same time. If Aristotle was right, the heavier object should hit the ground first. But if they fell together, then the belief of an entire civilization would collapse in an instant. Legend says Galileo even dropped objects from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, proving that mass does not determine speed of fall. The shock of this realization wasn't just about physics, it was about the arrogance of certainty. Humanity had been wrong for nearly 2,000 years, clinging to a falsehood because it was easier to trust authority than to question it. This thought experiment slices into your own life with brutal precision. How many truths do you carry that you've never tested, simply because they were handed to you by parents, teachers, leaders, or society? How many limitations feel unquestionable only because you've never dared to drop them and watch what happens? Galileo's falling bodies is not just about objects, it is about the weight of your beliefs. It demands that you ask yourself, are the things holding you down truly laws of reality, or are they just echoes of someone else's authority? The fall itself may be the only way to find out. Maxwell's equations reversal. Maxwell's equations reversal is a thought experiment that destabilizes your most basic assumptions about cause and effect, dragging you into a reality where even time itself refuses to play by your rules. Maxwell's equations describe how electricity and magnetism interact to create light and radiation. In our universe, these forces ripple outward like waves from a stone thrown into a pond, moving from the past into the future. But here's the shattering twist. Those same equations also allow for a mirror version, where waves ripple backward in time. The only reason we don't notice this reversed world is because we assume time only flows forward. This experiment rips away the limiting belief that reality must unfold in one direction. If light and energy could just as easily move backward, then the arrow of time you cling to may be nothing more than an illusion, a story your brain tells you so you can navigate existence without collapsing under chaos. Imagine memories flowing from the future into the present, events rippling toward causes rather than away from them. The foundation of your experience, progress, aging, growth, decay, suddenly unravels, leaving you floating in a terrifying freedom where limits dissolve. Maxwell's equations reversal doesn't just challenge physics, it challenges your entire perception of possibility. How many of your so-called truths exist only because you never dared to imagine their opposite? How much of your reality is a habit of thinking, not an inevitability of nature? This thought experiment whispers a disorienting message. What you call impossible may simply be the future echoing backward, waiting for you to notice. The Flatlander's Cube. The Flatlander's Cube is a mind-twisting experiment that rips open the boundaries of perception. Imagine a world where beings exist only in two dimensions, length and width, but no depth. These Flatlanders live on a sheet of paper, able to move forward, backward, left and right, but never up or down. One day, a three-dimensional cube passes through their world. At first, they see only a dot as the cube makes contact. Then the dot expands into a square, shifting in size as the cube moves through, before shrinking back into nothingness as it exits. To them, the cube is an incomprehensible series of changing shapes. They cannot grasp the full reality of the cube because their perception is trapped in 2 dimensions. This thought experiment forces you to confront your own perceptual limits. What if your understanding of reality is as restricted as theirs? What if what you call truth is only a shadow of something higher, richer, and unimaginable to your current senses? The Flatlander's cube shatters the belief that what you see is all there is. Just as the cube exists beyond the Flatlander's vision, so too might dimensions of reality exist beyond yours, possibilities, truths, and potentials you cannot yet fathom. The emotional sting is profound. How much of your life have you dismissed as impossible simply because you couldn't perceive it? How often have you mistaken your limits for reality itself? The Flatlander's cube whispers that your world is bigger than you can ever comprehend, and the walls you think are absolute may only be the edges of your own perception. The rubber hand illusion. The rubber hand illusion is a thought experiment that exposes just how fragile and deceptive your sense of self truly is. Imagine sitting at a table with one of your hands hidden from view. In front of you lies a lifelike rubber hand, positioned where your real one should be. A researcher strokes both your hidden hand and the rubber hand in perfect sync. Within minutes, your brain begins to accept the fake hand as your own. When the rubber hand is threatened with a hammer, you flinch, your body reacting as if your real hand were in danger. This experiment is terrifying because it shows how easily your mind can be tricked into adopting false realities. If something as intimate and personal as your own body can be rewritten by a simple illusion, then what else about you is nothing more than a fragile construction? How much of your identity, your fears, and your limitations are simply rubber hands you've mistaken for truth? The rubber hand illusion rips apart the comforting belief that your sense of self is solid and untouchable. It reveals that your brain is not a fortress of certainty, but a storyteller, eager to weave coherence out of whatever signals it receives, even if they are false. This means the chains that hold you, your insecurities, your doubts, your perceived weaknesses, may not be real at all. They may be nothing more than illusions you've learned to accept as part of you. The rubber hand illusion leaves you with a shattering realization. If the mind can be fooled into false limits, then it can also be freed into limitless possibility. The blind spot bias. The blind spot bias is a psychological trap that reveals the cruel irony of human perception. We are quick to see the flaws in others, but blind to the very same flaws in ourselves. You can easily spot arrogance, stubbornness, or ignorance in a friend, a colleague, or a stranger. Yet when those same traits appear in your own behavior, they vanish into invisibility. The bias works like a mirror that reflects everyone but you, keeping you convinced that you see the world clearly while everyone else is deluded. This thought experiment forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that your greatest limitation may not be your failures, but your blindness to them. Imagine 2 people in an argument, each convinced the other is closed-minded, each sure they are the reasonable one. The tragedy is that both may be trapped in the same bias, unable to recognize that they are mirrors of each other. How often have you dismissed advice, ignored warnings, or doubled down on mistakes because you trusted your own perspective too much to see your blind spot? The blind spot bias is terrifying because it leaves you defenseless against yourself. You can prepare for enemies, critics, and obstacles, but how do you fight what you cannot even see? It shakes the foundation of self-trust and challenges the belief that awareness alone is enough for growth. It whispers that humility is not weakness but survival, because only by admitting that you too are blind can you begin to glimpse the truth hiding in the shadows of your mind. The infinite canvas. The infinite canvas is a thought experiment that demolishes the illusion of scarcity and confronts you with the terrifying vastness of possibility. Imagine standing before a canvas so large it stretches endlessly in every direction. You hold a brush in your hand, and every stroke you make leaves a mark. Your choices, your dreams, your failures, your victories. There are no borders, no edges, no frame to contain you. The canvas cannot be filled, no matter how much you create. Every corner you paint only reveals more unmarked space, infinite and waiting. At first, this vision feels liberating. You can paint anything. You can reinvent yourself endlessly. There is no final judgment, no ceiling, no limit. But quickly, the weight sets in. The infinite canvas exposes the crushing fear of absolute freedom. With no boundaries, your excuses vanish. You cannot say there was no space for your dream, no room for your expression, no chance to rewrite your story. The truth stands naked. The canvas was always infinite, and it was always yours. This experiment obliterates the limiting belief that your life is constrained by circumstance, that your potential is boxed in by what has already been drawn. It shows you that the walls you see are illusions, comfort zones disguised as edges. Every moment you hesitate to act, you leave more of the canvas untouched, not because it is off limits, but because you refuse to lift the brush. The infinite canvas sears a single truth into your heart. Possibility is endless, but only you can decide whether the space before you remains blank or becomes a masterpiece. Plato's Cave. Plato's Cave is one of the most disturbing visions of human existence, a thought experiment that strips away the illusion of certainty. Imagine prisoners chained inside a dark cave, their backs turned to the entrance, their eyes fixed on a wall. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, unseen figures move objects that cast shadows onto the wall. The prisoners, knowing nothing else, believe these shadows are reality. To them, the flickering shapes are truth, meaning, and life itself. Now imagine one prisoner breaking free. He turns and sees the fire, the figures, and finally stumbles out of the cave into the blinding sunlight. At first, the light sears his eyes, and he resists it, longing for the familiar shadows. But as his vision clears, he sees the world as it truly is, vivid, alive, infinite. When he returns to the cave to tell the others, they mock him, reject him, even threaten to kill him because they cannot bear the idea that their entire reality is a lie. Plato's Cave is not about prisoners in chains. It is about you. The shadows are the limiting beliefs you cling to, the distorted images you mistake for truth. I can't. I'm not enough. This is all there is. The fire is the world of illusions you've been taught to accept, and the sunlight is the raw, terrifying freedom of reality. This experiment dares you to ask, are you still staring at shadows, mistaking them for truth, or will you risk the pain of breaking free to see the world as it truly is? Kant's categorical imperative. Kant's categorical imperative is a thought experiment that forces you to confront the brutal weight of morality without excuses or escape routes. Imagine living by a rule so absolute that it must hold true for everyone, everywhere, at all times. Before every action, you must ask, what if every human being on earth acted the same way I am about to act? If the world would collapse under that rule, then the action is forbidden. If the world could endure it, then the action is moral. On the surface, it sounds like a noble compass, but its power lies in how merciless it is. You cannot lie, even if it might protect someone, because a world where everyone lies would dissolve trust completely. You cannot steal even if you are starving, because a world where everyone steals would destroy the very idea of ownership. You cannot treat others as tools for your own ends, because if everyone did, humanity itself would lose its worth. The categorical imperative slices away the comforting gray areas you cling to, leaving you naked in the clarity of universal law. This experiment annihilates the belief that your choices are small, private, or insignificant. Every decision becomes a mirror of what you would demand from all humanity. It reveals the terrifying truth that morality is not about convenience or circumstance. It is about what you are willing to turn into a law for the entire world. And in that unforgiving reflection, you are forced to ask yourself, if everyone lived exactly as I do, what kind of world would exist? Paradox of hedonism. The paradox of hedonism is a cruel riddle of human desire. The more you chase happiness directly, the more it slips away. Imagine a person who wakes each morning with one mission: to be happy. They try to collect pleasures, avoid discomfort, and arrange every detail of life around the pursuit of joy. Yet the harder they grasp, the more hollow their victories feel. The nights end in dissatisfaction, the laughter fades quickly, and the emptiness grows heavier. Happiness, once idolized, becomes a ghost that recedes the closer you approach. This paradox reveals something unsettling about the human condition. Pleasure is real, joy is real, but they often emerge indirectly while pursuing purpose, connection, creativity, or growth. When you stop obsessing over happiness and instead immerse yourself in something beyond yourself, joy arrives uninvited, slipping quietly into your life. But when you pursue it like prey, it resists, mocking you with its elusiveness. The emotional sting of this thought experiment is how clearly it mirrors your own struggles. How many times have you told yourself, I'll be happy when you earn more, when you love more, when you escape pain? And how many times has happiness evaporated the moment you reach for it? The paradox of hedonism shatters the belief that happiness is a destination waiting for you to arrive. It forces you to face the bitter truth that joy cannot be commanded or owned. It must be discovered in the moments you stop chasing and begin living. Happiness is not the path's end. It is the shadow it casts when you walk it with meaning. The paradox of self-improvement. The paradox of self-improvement is a thought experiment that slices straight into the heart of your identity and leaves you questioning whether change is even possible. Imagine deciding to transform yourself, become stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more compassionate. But here's the haunting question. Who is doing the improving? If your current self is flawed, how can that same flawed self be trusted to build something greater? If you are the architect and the clay, the judge and the student, how do you escape the loop of remaking yourself with the very tools that created your limitations in the first place? This paradox strikes at the core of every human striving. You believe you can reinvent yourself, yet the self that seeks change is bound by its own blind spots, fears, and habits. It is like asking a prisoner to design the key to their own cell without ever having seen the lock. The more you wrestle with this, the more suffocating it feels. Maybe self-improvement is just the same self rearranging its furniture, never truly leaving the room. But hidden within the paradox is fire. It destroys the comforting lie that transformation is clean or easy, and in its place, it ignites the truth. Real growth often feels impossible because it requires a leap outside the self you know. It demands you step into uncertainty, into practices and perspectives that feel alien, uncomfortable, even threatening to who you currently are. The paradox of self-improvement forces you to confront the painful reality that to become new, you must in some way let the old you die, and that death, terrifying as it is, might be the only doorway into freedom. The bootstrap paradox. The bootstrap paradox is a dizzying loop that tears apart your sense of origin and cause. Imagine a scientist who travels into the future and discovers a groundbreaking book filled with brilliant equations and theories. He copies them down carefully, then returns to his own time and publishes the book as his own. Decades later, a young version of himself finds this same book, studies it, and one day grows up to become the very scientist who brings it forward in time. But here's the terrifying question. Who actually wrote the book? Where did the knowledge truly come from if it only exists because it was passed back and forth forever in a closed loop? This paradox is more than a time travel riddle. It is a mirror to the way you think about your own beginnings. How many of your beliefs, your habits, your limitations are ideas you inherited without questioning? You repeat them, teach them, and pass them along as though they were truths, when in reality they may have no origin, no foundation at all. Like the book in the paradox, they simply circulate endlessly, unchallenged, gaining weight and authority simply because they have always been there. The bootstrap paradox exposes the fragility of certainty. If an idea can exist without an origin, then how many of your beliefs are nothing more than self-perpetuating loops, unquestioned hand-me-downs from culture, family, or fear? The haunting realization is that many of the limits you cling to may never have had a real beginning. They persist because you keep carrying them, and the moment you drop them, the loop ends. Monty Hall problem. The Monty Hall problem is a thought experiment that feels like a trick, yet it reveals the unsettling truth about how easily your intuition betrays you. Imagine standing on a game show stage, 3 doors in front of you. Behind one door is a shiny new car. Behind the other 2, goats. You pick a door, say, door 1. The host, who knows what lies behind each door, opens another, say, door 3, and reveals a goat. Now you are asked the question that twists people's minds. Do you stick with your original choice or switch to the other unopened door? Almost everyone insists it doesn't matter, that the odds are now 50-50, but the cold math says otherwise. If you stay, your chance of winning is 1 in 3. If you switch, your chance doubles to 2 in 3. The host's reveal changes everything, yet the human brain resists it, clinging to its first choice, its illusion of certainty, its need to feel in control. The Monty Hall problem isn't just about probability. It is about the terrifying truth that your gut instincts, the very compass you trust to navigate life, are often wrong. It exposes how stubbornly you cling to initial choices, even when new evidence screams for change. How many times have you stayed on the wrong path, the wrong job, the wrong relationship, simply because you picked it first? This problem smashes the belief that intuition is always reliable. It shows you that sometimes survival demands abandoning pride and embracing the uncomfortable switch. The door to freedom may not be the one you chose. It may be the one you resist the most. The paradox of value. The paradox of value, also called the diamond water paradox, pierces into the heart of how we measure worth. It asks a disturbing question. Why is something essential for life, like water, often considered cheap, while something utterly unnecessary for survival, like diamonds, is valued beyond measure? Water can quench thirst, sustain crops, and keep you alive, yet it is taken for granted. Diamonds, glittering stones with little practical use, are worshipped, hoarded, and fought over. This paradox exposes the painful truth that human beings often mistake rarity for value and familiarity for insignificance. We dismiss what is abundant and chase what is scarce, even if it does nothing to nourish us. Think about your own life. How many relationships, moments, or blessings have you overlooked because they were always there, quiet and dependable, like water? And how many empty pursuits have you chased because society sparkled them in front of you like diamonds? The paradox of value is not just economic. It is deeply personal. It forces you to confront the ways you undervalue your own life, the breath in your lungs, the love of someone close, the sunrise you ignore, the health you assume will last. These are the waters you forget until drought strikes. Meanwhile, you may sacrifice your time, your energy, even your soul, chasing diamonds that cannot quench your thirst. The sting of this experiment is how cruelly familiar it feels. It rips away the illusion that value is obvious and reveals how easily you can starve surrounded by abundance, all because you believe the wrong things glittered. The paradox of choice. The paradox of choice is a thought experiment that crushes the comforting illusion that more options automatically mean more freedom. Imagine walking into a store to buy a simple bottle of water. Instead of 1 or 2 brands, you're confronted with 50, sparkling, flavored, alkaline, vitamin-infused, imported, filtered through volcanic rock. At first, the abundance feels empowering. You tell yourself freedom lies in variety. But the longer you stare, the heavier it becomes. Every option splits into another question. What if I pick the wrong one? What if the better choice is just one shelf over? The paradox of choice reveals the sinister weight of freedom without limits. Too many paths don't liberate you, they paralyze you. And even when you finally choose, the satisfaction is poisoned by regret, because every other possibility you didn't take haunts you like a ghost. What if the relationship you ended was the right one? What if the career path you rejected was the door to happiness? Your mind turns infinite possibilities into infinite prisons, each choice a reminder of all you might have lost. This experiment obliterates the limiting belief that happiness lies in maximizing options. It exposes the dark truth that more isn't always better. Sometimes it's emptier. Real freedom comes not from drowning in endless decisions, but from committing fully to one and breathing life into it. The paradox of choice doesn't comfort you, it unsettles you, forcing you to see that your endless hunger for more might be the very reason you never feel enough. The Overton window. The Overton window is a thought experiment that reveals how the boundaries of belief are not fixed, but manipulated. Imagine a sliding window that frames what society considers acceptable to discuss or believe. Inside the window are ideas seen as normal, reasonable, or moral. Outside are ideas dismissed as extreme, dangerous, or unthinkable. Over time, the window shifts. What was once radical becomes mainstream, and what was once unthinkable becomes celebrated. The terrifying part is how easily this shift can happen without anyone noticing. This experiment forces you to confront how much of what you call truth or common sense is nothing more than what currently fits inside the window. Your beliefs about money, success, love, freedom, even morality. So many are not the result of independent thought, but of what the window has allowed you to see. You mistake consensus for reality, but the frame is being moved constantly by culture, politics, media, and authority. The emotional punch of the Overton window is realizing how small the box around your mind really is. How many dreams have you abandoned because the window told you they were unrealistic? How many limitations have you swallowed because the window said they were normal? The Overton window whispers that your world is not defined by truth, but by the shifting borders of perception. And if those borders can move, then the prison you've been living in is not unbreakable, it's adjustable. The real question is not where the window is placed, but whether you will keep letting others move it for you. Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles and the tortoise is a thought experiment that bends reality until motion itself feels impossible. Imagine the legendary warrior Achilles racing a slow-moving tortoise. To make it fair, the tortoise is given a head start. Achilles charges forward with incredible speed, but here is the paradox. By the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise began, the tortoise has moved a little farther ahead. When Achilles reaches that new point, the tortoise has moved again. No matter how fast Achilles runs, he is always arriving where the tortoise once was, while the tortoise keeps inching forward. By this logic, Achilles can never catch the tortoise. Of course, in reality, Achilles would overtake the tortoise easily, but the paradox rips open something deeper. It shows how infinite division of time and space can trap you in the illusion of never arriving. And isn't that exactly how life feels? You chase success, happiness, or fulfillment, and every time you reach the point you were aiming for, the goal has moved a little further ahead. You graduate, but then you need a job. You get the job, but then you need a promotion. You find love, but then you crave security. Always running, never arriving. Achilles and the tortoise smashes the belief that the finish line will finally bring peace. It reveals the haunting truth that if you measure life only by destinations, you will always be chasing, never arriving. The paradox whispers that motion is endless, and the race itself, not the finish, is where life actually unfolds. The brain split. The brain split is a thought experiment that strikes at the very core of identity, forcing you to ask whether you are truly one being at all. Imagine a patient undergoing a radical surgery in which the two hemispheres of their brain are separated, each side still capable of thought, perception, and even decision-making. Suddenly, one body houses two streams of consciousness. One hand begins to act against the other. One eye sees something the other does not. One half of the mind believes one thing, while the other half believes another. Which one is the real person? Which one is truly you? The terror of this experiment is not in the surgery, but in what it reveals about the fragility of self. If splitting a brain creates two identities, then was the unity you always believed in just an illusion? Are you a single, indivisible self, or are you already a collection of competing voices stitched together by habit and memory? This thought experiment slices into your everyday beliefs. How often do you feel torn between opposing desires, one part of you pulling forward while another drags back? You call it indecision, but perhaps it is the echo of many selves arguing inside you. The brain split forces you to confront the chilling possibility that identity is not singular but fractured, not solid but fluid. And yet, within this unsettling vision lies liberation. If you are not fixed, then you are not trapped. If self is many, then self can change. The brain split whispers that the limits you cling to may only be fragments, and that the whole was never as stable as you imagined. The multiplicity mirror. The multiplicity mirror is a thought experiment that shatters the illusion of a single, fixed self and confronts you with the terrifying possibility that you are not one person, but countless versions of yourself, layered and shifting like reflections in glass. Imagine standing before a mirror that does not show just one image of you, but thousands, every possible version of who you could have been, every self that exists in the shadows of choices you made and choices you abandoned. One reflection shows the you who chased the dream you let die. Another shows the you who stayed in that relationship, who moved to that city, who never took that risk. And they all stare back, alive in their own worlds, reminding you that identity is not a single thread, but an infinite web. The multiplicity mirror tears apart the limiting belief that you are trapped in one version of yourself. It whispers that the you defend so fiercely is only one reflection, chosen by habit, fear, and circumstance. At any moment, you could step into another version. The boundaries between who you are and who you could be are thinner than glass, waiting to be shattered by a single decision. This thought experiment is unsettling because it leaves you with no excuses. You cannot say, "This is just who I am," when infinite selves stand before you, proving otherwise. Every path you've avoided, every dream you've silenced, every identity you've denied still lives in the mirror. The question it hurls back at you with unbearable intensity is simple. Which version of yourself will you finally choose to become? The genie's wish. The genie's wish is a thought experiment that exposes the dangerous gap between what you think you want and what you truly need. Imagine a genie appearing before you, offering to grant any wish without limit. At first, the possibilities feel intoxicating: wealth, power, beauty, immortality. You ask, the genie grants, and for a moment, it feels like perfection. But then the consequences unravel. The wealth isolates you. The power corrupts you. The immortality traps you in endless loneliness as everyone you love fades away. The very thing you thought would set you free becomes the source of your suffering. This experiment forces you to confront the brutal truth about desire. How many times have you chased something with everything you had, only to find emptiness waiting at the end? How often have you mistaken craving for clarity, telling yourself, "If I just had this, I would finally be happy"? The genie's wish reveals that unchecked desire is a trickster. It gives you what you asked for while stealing what you never realized you valued most. The emotional sting lies in its mirror. Your life is already full of wishes you've made without even speaking them aloud. The career you chose, the relationships you built, the habits you've clung to, these are the wishes you granted yourself. And if they leave you restless, it's not because you asked for too little, but because you asked for the wrong thing. The genie's wish dares you to stop wishing blindly and instead confront the terrifying question, what is it you truly want? Paradox of freedom. The paradox of freedom is a thought experiment that twists the very meaning of liberty into something frightening. Imagine a society where every person is given total, unlimited freedom. No rules, no restrictions, no boundaries. At first, it feels intoxicating. Everyone can do whatever they want. But soon, chaos erupts. The strong dominate the weak. Greed swallows fairness, and those willing to harm others bend the world to their will. In the absence of rules, freedom itself begins to collapse until only a handful of people hold all the power and everyone else lives in chains. Absolute freedom devours itself. This paradox rips apart the comforting idea that freedom means doing whatever you want. It reveals the darker truth. Freedom without structure becomes its own form of slavery. When nothing is forbidden, nothing is safe. When everything is permitted, trust dies. And when trust dies, freedom becomes a weapon for the ruthless. But this isn't just about politics or society. It's about your personal life. How often have you told yourself, I just want total freedom? Yet, when every path is open, you freeze. You drown in options. Without boundaries, your choices scatter and your will weakens. The dream of infinite freedom leaves you paralyzed, lost, and unanchored. The paradox of freedom smashes the belief that liberty comes from tearing down all limits. It shows you that true freedom often comes from the right boundaries, the commitments, the values, the disciplines that protect you from your own chaos. It whispers a hard truth. Without structure, freedom dies, but with purpose, freedom finally begins to live. Paradox of inquiry. The paradox of inquiry, also known as Menno's paradox, is a thought experiment that claws at the very idea of learning and discovery. It asks a devastatingly simple question. How can you search for something if you don't know what it is? If you already know it, inquiry is pointless. You've already arrived. But if you don't know it at all, how will you even recognize it when you stumble across it? The paradox traps you in a cruel loop, where both knowing and not knowing seem to make discovery impossible. This strikes at the heart of human growth. How many times have you felt paralyzed because you didn't know where to start? You tell yourself you can't pursue your dream because you don't know enough yet. But how could you ever know enough without beginning? The paradox of inquiry exposes the limiting belief that you must already have clarity before you act. It whispers that the map cannot be drawn until your feet begin walking. The emotional sting of this paradox is how easily it mirrors your life. You wait for confidence before you risk, for certainty before you leap, for proof before you try. Yet what if certainty never comes? What if recognition only blooms after the search begins? The paradox of inquiry rips away the illusion of readiness and forces you to confront the truth. Discovery is born not from knowledge, but from courage. You don't learn because you already know. You learn because you dare to stumble in the dark, trusting that the light will reveal itself only after you take the step. Shipwreck Survival Lottery. The Shipwreck Survival Lottery is a thought experiment that strips bare the illusions of morality and forces you to face the raw terror of survival. Imagine a shipwreck where a small group of survivors clings to a raft in the endless sea. The supplies are running out, thirst claws at their throats, and starvation gnaws at their bodies. They realize not everyone can live. To decide who will die so that the others might survive, They propose a lottery. Each person draws a slip, and whoever is chosen will be sacrificed and eaten. It is not cruelty, they tell themselves, but fairness, a system that spares them from descending into chaos. But here is the torment. Can killing ever be justified simply because chance declared it so? Does survival excuse the horror of turning on another human being? The shipwreck survival lottery obliterates the comforting belief that morality is always clear and simple. It drags you into a nightmare where fairness and savagery are indistinguishable, where justice itself becomes a weapon of despair. This experiment tears away the illusion that you will always be safe from impossible choices. It forces you to see that under the pressure of survival, the values you cling to may collapse, revealing a self you never wanted to face. The shipwreck survival lottery lingers like a poison in the mind because it whispers a question that will not go away. When pushed to the edge, would you cling to morality, or would you draw the slip and hope it was not your own? The invisible rope. The invisible rope is a thought experiment that reveals how easily the mind can be imprisoned by illusions. Imagine a circus elephant tied to a post with a heavy rope during its youth. The rope is unbreakable then, and the elephant learns through repeated failure that escape is impossible. Years later, the massive adult elephant, powerful enough to shatter the post with a single pull, is still tethered with the same thin rope. It does not try to break free because it no longer believes it can. The rope is no longer physical. It is mental. This image is not about elephants. It is about you. The invisible rope is every limiting belief you've been conditioned to accept. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not meant for more. They may have been true once when you were weaker, younger, unprepared. But now, they are illusions that persist only because you don't test them. The emotional force of the invisible rope is devastating because it shows you that the prison you feel trapped in may not even exist. You stand there, capable of breaking free, but paralyzed by old lessons that no longer apply. How many dreams have you abandoned, not because they were impossible, but because you never dared to pull? The invisible rope whispers a brutal truth. The cage isn't real anymore. It was built from the past, but it is maintained by you. The moment you test it, the moment you pull, the illusion snaps, and freedom was waiting all along. The mirror test. The mirror test is a thought experiment that pierces directly into the mystery of self-awareness. Imagine placing a mark on an animal's forehead and then putting it in front of a mirror. If the animal touches the mark on its own head rather than the reflection, it demonstrates recognition. It realizes the image is itself. Great apes, dolphins, elephants, even magpies have passed this test. Many others fail, attacking the reflection or ignoring it entirely, believing it is another creature staring back. This simple experiment feels innocent, but its implications are devastating. The mirror test asks you the same question. Do you truly recognize yourself? Not just the face in the glass, but the flaws, fears, and contradictions that make you human. How often do you mistake your reflection for something else, convincing yourself that your failures are someone else's fault, or that the person staring back is a stranger you barely know? The mirror test smashes the belief that self-awareness is automatic. It reveals how easy it is to live unconsciously, mistaking your habits, patterns, and limiting beliefs for something outside of you. Passing the mirror is not about seeing your face. It is about having the courage to see your truth. Most people spend their lives attacking the reflection, blaming the other, never realizing the enemy is their own unexamined self. The mirror test whispers its haunting challenge. Can you look directly into the glass, see the mark on your own forehead, and admit, this is me, and I am the one who must change? The Last Man. The Last Man is a thought experiment that strips away every illusion of meaning by imagining the ultimate loneliness. Picture yourself standing on a silent earth after humanity has vanished. Cities crumble, oceans stretch endlessly, forests reclaim the land, but there are no voices, no laughter, no witnesses. You are the final heartbeat of the human race, the last thread of a story that has unraveled completely. Every achievement, every victory, every belief in legacy dissolves into dust because there is no one left to remember. The question that cuts deep is this: what would matter to you then? Would you still chase goals if no one could see them? Would you still cling to pride if there was no one to compare yourself to? The last man forces you to confront how much of your identity depends on others. The applause, the validation, the recognition you secretly crave. Without them, what remains? This experiment is terrifying because it exposes the fragile scaffolding of meaning that props up your life. The degrees, the titles, the possessions, the praise, all of it vanishes when there is no one else to value it. And yet, within that crushing emptiness lies a strange liberation. If nothing is remembered, then perhaps the only meaning is in the act itself, in the breath you take, in the beauty you witness, in the choices you make even when no eyes are watching. The Last Man is not about death, but about life laid bare without audience or reward. It asks you to face the brutal truth. If you were the last, would you still choose to live? The Omnipotent Child. The Omnipotent Child is a thought experiment that shakes the very foundation of desire by showing you the horror of absolute fulfillment. Imagine a child born with limitless power. Every whim is instantly satisfied. If they want candy, it appears. If they want a kingdom, it rises from the ground. If they want the stars themselves, they fall into their hands. There is no waiting, no striving, no failure, no hunger unanswered. At first, the child delights in their powers, but quickly the sweetness turns to ash. Every victory is hollow because it requires no effort. Every pleasure fades because it was too easily won. The child, omnipotent and untouchable, becomes consumed by emptiness. This experiment annihilates the limiting belief that happiness lies in getting everything you want. It exposes the dark truth that struggle, scarcity, and even suffering are not obstacles to joy. They are the very soil from which meaning grows. Without the risk of loss, love has no depth. Without the chance of failure, achievement has no weight. Without the possibility of pain, pleasure is just noise. The omnipotent child stands as a mirror to your own cravings. How often do you tell yourself, if only I had this, I would finally be happy? How often do you fantasize about a life with no obstacles, no resistance, no uncertainty? Yet this thought experiment whispers the truth you fear most. The life you dream of without struggle would slowly hollow you out. It dares you to see that your limitations, your battles, your unmet desires are not curses. They are the very gifts that keep you alive. The empty set paradox. The empty set paradox is one of the strangest and most unsettling experiments in logic because it forces you to face the existence of nothing itself. In mathematics, the empty set is the set that contains nothing, no objects, no numbers, no members at all. Yet here is the paradox. The empty set is still something. It is still defined, still recognized, still given a symbol, still existing as an entity that holds nothing. Nothing becomes something simply because we name it. This paradox strikes at the heart of human limitation. How many times have you told yourself, I have nothing? Nothing to offer, nothing to build on, nothing to hope for. But the empty set shatters that illusion, because even nothing carries the seeds of possibility. Nothingness is not absence, it is potential. It is the blank page before the first word, the silence before the first note, the empty stage before the play begins. The emotional sting comes when you realize that the moments you feared most, the times you lost everything, the seasons when you felt stripped bare, were not truly void. They were the empty set of your life, terrifying because they appeared hollow, but alive with the possibility to become anything. The paradox reveals that even when you are reduced to nothing, you are not erased. You are standing at the edge of infinite beginnings. The empty set paradox whispers that what you call nothing is never empty. It is the womb of creation, waiting for you to decide what will fill it. The solipsism trap. The solipsism trap is a thought experiment that drags you into the most unsettling abyss of philosophy, the possibility that you are the only conscious being in existence. Imagine that everything you see, every person you love, every voice you hear, every world event, all of it is nothing more than a projection of your own mind. Your family, your friends, even this very sentence. What if they are illusions, dream-like shadows without inner life, created only to fill the stage of your reality? If solipsism is true, then you are utterly alone, and the world is nothing but a story your mind tells itself. The horror of this thought experiment is not just the loneliness, it is the doubt. How could you ever prove otherwise? You cannot climb into another's mind and verify their consciousness. You can only assume it by the way they behave, by the way they mirror your own inner life. But assumption is not proof. Solipsism gnaws at the fragile belief that your world is shared, that other people are as real as you are, that connection is more than a beautiful hallucination. And yet, hidden in this trap is a brutal freedom. If everything is an extension of your mind, then the limits you place on yourself are the only chains that exist. Every insult, every rejection, every wall you face could be nothing but echoes of your own belief. The solipsism trap annihilates certainty and leaves you trembling before a terrifying possibility. Reality may not be real, but if it is your dream, then the power to shape it has always been yours. The copy problem. The copy problem is a thought experiment that slices directly into the fabric of identity, forcing you to question whether you are truly unique, or if you could be duplicated like a file on a computer. Imagine a machine capable of scanning every detail of your brain, every memory, every emotion, every flicker of consciousness, and then reconstructing it perfectly in another body or on another substrate. The copy wakes up believing it is you, with your history, your scars, your loves, your dreams. It looks in the mirror and sees your face. It insists it is you. But if the original you still exists, then who is the real one? The horror of the copy problem is not in the technology, but in what it reveals about the fragility of self. If a perfect duplicate can claim to be you, then what makes you anything more than an arrangement of information? Are you your body, your memories, or something deeper, something that cannot be replicated? The copy problem rips away the comforting illusion that your identity is fixed and indivisible, showing instead that it may be as replaceable as a pattern. The emotional sting comes from realizing how much of your life is built on the desperate belief that you are singular, irreplaceable, and continuous. But this thought experiment forces you to ask, if everything you are could be copied, then what truly makes you, you? The copy problem doesn't just question immortality or technology. It drills into your deepest fear that the person you think you are may be nothing more than a story, one that could be told again by another voice wearing your face. The genie's dilemma. The genie's dilemma is a thought experiment that cracks open the seductive lie that unlimited wishes would solve your life. Imagine standing before a genie who offers you anything: wealth, power, love, eternal youth. At first, your heart races. The possibilities are intoxicating, but then the darker truth begins to creep in. Every wish you make ripples with unforeseen consequences. You wish for love, but is it real if it was conjured? You wish for wealth, but it changes the way others see you, twisting trust into envy. You wish for eternal life, but it slowly becomes a prison as everyone you care about withers away. The very gift that seemed to free you begins to enslave you. The genie's dilemma obliterates the belief that happiness is just one desire away. It forces you to face the haunting reality that getting exactly what you want can be as destructive as never having it. Each wish becomes a mirror, showing you how fragile and short-sighted your desires truly are. What feels like salvation in one moment becomes torment in the next, because desire without wisdom is poison. This thought experiment shakes you with a devastating question. Do you even know what you truly want? Or are you just chasing shadows, convinced that fulfillment lies in the next prize, the next goal, the next miracle? The genie's dilemma doesn't simply warn you about unintended consequences. It screams that your deepest limitations are not born from lack of wishes, but from lack of clarity. It leaves you staring into the heart of your desires, realizing the most dangerous thing you could ever receive is exactly what you asked for. Paradox of time discounting. The paradox of time discounting is a cruel mirror of human behavior that shows how easily we betray ourselves. Imagine being offered two rewards, one small and immediate, the other larger but delayed. Rationally, the larger future reward should always win, yet time discounting twists your mind. The donut today feels more valuable than the health tomorrow. The impulse buy now feels better than financial freedom years later. The paradox is that when the future finally arrives, it always becomes the present, and you are left with nothing but regret over the choices you made to satisfy a fleeting now. This experiment rips apart the illusion that procrastination and indulgence are harmless. Every skipped workout, every hour wasted, every dream delayed piles into a debt your future self is forced to pay. You act as though tomorrow is a stranger, someone else entirely, yet tomorrow will be you. The pain, the emptiness, the opportunities lost, they land squarely on your shoulders. The paradox of time discounting burns because it reveals the betrayal hiding inside every moment of delay. You are not choosing between now and later. You are stealing from yourself, sabotaging the person you are becoming, and the most terrifying truth is that the future always comes. The health crisis, the financial struggle, the wasted years, they arrive because time never stops moving. The paradox dares you to see beyond the seduction of the present, to recognize that discipline is not punishment, but loyalty to your future self. Every choice is a vote for who you will be when the future arrives, and it always arrives. The expanding circle. The expanding circle is a thought experiment that forces you to confront the boundaries of your compassion and question why you draw them where you do. Imagine the earliest humans huddled together in tribes. Their circle of concern was tiny. They cared for family, maybe their clan, but outsiders were threats. As time passed, the circle widened. It began to include the tribe, then the village, then the nation. Centuries later, humanity stretched it again, embracing different races, religions, and cultures. Today, many extend it further still, to animals, to the environment, even to future generations. The lesson is brutal and liberating at once. Morality is not fixed. It grows only when you dare to push your circle outward, and yet most people still live in cages built from narrow circles, protecting only their own, ignoring suffering that lies just beyond the border. We excuse ourselves, saying, "That's not my problem," or "That's too far away." But the expanding circle exposes this lie. It reveals that the limits of your compassion are self-imposed, inherited from fear and comfort, not carved into the fabric of reality. What if the child in another country were as real to you as your neighbor's child? What if the stranger's pain burned in your chest as sharply as your own? The expanding circle tears away the belief that morality has natural limits. It whispers that every wall you defend is a choice, and every choice to exclude shrinks your own humanity. To expand the circle is to expand yourself, and to discover that the borders you cling to were never real at all. The transparent prison. The transparent prison is a thought experiment that reveals the cruelest kind of captivity, the kind where the bars are invisible. Imagine living inside a glass cage, one without locks, chains, or guards. You can see the world outside, full of freedom, opportunity, and possibility, yet something in you keeps you from walking out. The walls aren't real, but they feel real. You stay put, obeying boundaries that were never actually there. This is the prison most people live in every day. It is built from limiting beliefs, fears, and assumptions handed down by parents, teachers, culture, or painful experiences. You tell yourself you're not smart enough, not talented enough, not deserving enough. You tell yourself success belongs to others, that love is for the lucky, that freedom is for the bold. Each thought is another pane of glass, transparent but solid to your mind, keeping you pacing inside the same tight circle while life unfolds just beyond your reach. The transparent prison is terrifying because it's self-maintained. No warden is holding you down. No chains are binding you. The only thing stopping you is the belief that you are trapped. And that realization is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it forces you to admit you've been holding the key all along. Liberating because once you see the glass for what it is, you can shatter it. This experiment exposes the most painful truth. The limits you bow to are rarely real. The bars exist only in your mind, and the moment you stop believing in them, you walk free. The double bind. The double bind is a thought experiment that rips apart the illusion of choice and traps you in a cage where every option leads to suffering. Imagine being told you must make a decision, but every path you take destroys something vital. If you speak, you betray yourself. If you stay silent, you betray someone else. If you act, you lose. If you refuse, you lose. No matter which direction you turn, the walls close in tighter. It is not the absence of options that suffocates you. It is the cruel certainty that all options hurt. This experiment exposes the torment of living under contradictions, where freedom becomes paralysis. It forces you to see how often life hands you choices that are not choices at all, but traps disguised as decisions. You stay in the toxic job, or you risk financial ruin. You remain in the hollow relationship, or you face loneliness. You obey the rules and lose yourself, or you break them and face punishment. The double bind smashes the comforting belief that every problem has a clean solution. Sometimes the structure itself is broken, and the only way out is to refuse to play. The cruelty of the double bind is that it makes you complicit in your own suffering. You choose, but the choice was poisoned before you touched it, and yet, hidden in this despair is a spark of fire. The double bind whispers the most dangerous truth of all, that true freedom begins not when you choose between the given options, but when you dare to step outside the frame entirely and create a path that was never offered to you. The infinite staircase. The infinite staircase is a thought experiment that captures the maddening cycle of progress without arrival. Imagine a staircase that spirals endlessly upward, each step promising to bring you closer to the top. You climb and climb, fueled by the belief that the next turn will reveal the summit. But no matter how far you go, the staircase never ends. Each rise leads only to another and another in an endless loop of striving. This image is not just about stairs. It is about your life. How many times have you told yourself, "I'll finally feel successful when I get there"? You chase the promotion, the relationship, the recognition, convinced it will be the last step. But as soon as you arrive, the satisfaction slips away and a new staircase begins. The infinite staircase exposes the illusion that fulfillment lies at the top. It reveals the heartbreaking truth that chasing external milestones without inner grounding leaves you climbing forever, exhausted yet never complete. The emotional sting is brutal. You are not broken because you feel restless. You are caught in a design that never ends. The staircase feeds the lie that happiness is somewhere above you, just out of reach, when in reality, the summit doesn't exist. The paradox is that the only way to escape the staircase is not to climb faster, but to stop and realize that meaning is found on the step you are standing on. The infinite staircase forces you to face the terrifying possibility that you could spend your whole life climbing toward a top that was never there. The Desert Traveler. The Desert Traveler is a thought experiment that drags you into the raw edge of survival and hope. Imagine a lone traveler wandering through an endless desert. His water is gone, the sun burns his skin, and every step feels heavier than the last. On the horizon, he sees an oasis shimmering in the distance. But is it real, or only a mirage? His body screams at him to give up, to collapse into the sand, and let the suffering end. Yet something inside whispers, what if the oasis is real? What if salvation lies just beyond this next step? This experiment slices into the heart of despair. How often have you been on the edge of giving up, on a dream, a relationship, or yourself, convinced there was nothing left to reach for? The Desert Traveler reveals the cruel paradox of hope. It may be a mirage, but without it, you die where you stand. The possibility, however faint, keeps the legs moving, keeps the heart beating, keeps life alive. It dismantles the belief that certainty is required to continue. You don't need proof that the oasis exists. You only need the courage to act as if it might. The Traveler shows you that survival, progress, and transformation are fueled not by guarantees, but by faith in possibilities unseen. The desert will whisper that it is hopeless, but the next step could reveal everything. The Desert Traveler leaves you trembling with a simple, devastating truth. Giving up guarantees death, but walking forward keeps the miracle alive. The Caged Bird. The Caged Bird is a thought experiment that pierces straight into the heart of perceived limitation. Picture a bird that has been kept in a cage its entire life. It learns the edges of its prison, memorizes the narrow space where it can move, and stops trying to fly beyond the bars. Now imagine the door is suddenly left wide open. Freedom stretches out in every direction, the sky endless and waiting. But the bird doesn't leave. It stays inside, clinging to the familiar prison, even though it is no longer confined. This image is not about the bird, it is about you. How many times have you been conditioned by fear, doubt, or failure until the walls around you felt unbreakable? How many times have you mistaken habit for destiny or comfort for safety? The Caged Bird reveals that often the prison isn't built of steel, but of memory, of repetition, of beliefs whispered into you until they became laws. The emotional sting comes from realizing how often the door has already been open. Opportunities may have stood before you, relationships ready to bloom, chances to rise higher than you imagined, but you stayed in place, convinced you couldn't move. The Caged Bird forces you to see how much of your suffering comes not from the bars themselves, but from the refusal to believe you can fly beyond them. This experiment leaves you with a haunting vision. The sky is waiting, limitless and indifferent, and the only thing keeping you grounded is the echo of a cage that no longer exists. The Lottery Winner. The Lottery Winner is a thought experiment that rips away the fantasy so many people cling to, the belief that sudden wealth will solve everything. Imagine someone who wins an enormous jackpot overnight. Their old worries about bills, rent, and work disappear instantly. At first, the euphoria is intoxicating. They buy the dream house, the luxury car, the vacations, and shower friends and family with gifts. For a while, life feels like paradise. But slowly, shadows begin to creep in. Relationships strain under suspicion and jealousy. Old friends fade away, unsure if love or money is keeping them close. The sense of purpose that came from striving, working, and overcoming challenges dissolves. Soon the winner feels trapped in a golden cage, surrounded by abundance yet starving for meaning. This experiment obliterates the limiting belief that external fixes can repair internal emptiness. It reveals the cruel irony that what you think will save you may instead hollow you out. The lottery does not erase insecurity, heal wounds, or give direction. It only amplifies what was already inside. If you were restless before, you become more restless. If you were lost, you become lost with more distractions. The lottery winner forces you to confront a hard truth. Fulfillment cannot be bought, gifted, or stumbled into. It grows from struggle, effort, and the deep satisfaction of becoming. Without that, even paradise becomes a prison. This thought experiment leaves you staring into your own desires, asking the haunting question, if you were handed everything you thought you wanted tomorrow, would you finally feel whole, or would the emptiness just echo louder? The Forest of Mirrors. The Forest of Mirrors is a thought experiment that confronts you with the horror of infinite reflection. Imagine wandering into a vast forest where every tree is replaced by a mirror. Wherever you turn, you see yourself multiplied, stretched, and distorted into endless copies. You lose track of which reflection is closest to the truth. Some mirrors flatter you, some disfigure you, some split you into fragments that look almost real, but not quite. The deeper you go, the more disoriented you become, until you no longer know who you are or which way leads out. This experiment is not about mirrors, it is about identity. How much of yourself is shaped by reflection? You look into the opinions of others, the approval of society, the expectations of family, and you mistake those reflections for truth. Over time, you begin to live inside them, performing for each mirror, adjusting to each angle until the raw self inside you is buried. The Forest of Mirrors reveals the terrifying fragility of identity built on reflection. It multiplies endlessly but never satisfies. The emotional sting lies in recognizing how many of your choices may not have been yours at all. How often do you chase success that was only a mirror of someone else's desire? How often do you twist yourself to fit the reflection you hope others will approve of? The Forest of Mirrors whispers a brutal truth. If you search for yourself only in reflection, you will wander forever. The only way out is to stop staring at the mirrors and dare to trust the self hidden behind them. The Watchmaker Argument. The Watchmaker Argument is a thought experiment that pierces into the mystery of design and purpose. Imagine walking through a field and stumbling across a watch lying in the grass. You pick it up, notice the gears, the precision, the way every part interlocks to measure time perfectly. You would never believe it simply appeared there by chance. A watch with its intricate design must have had a watchmaker. From this, the argument leaps to the universe itself. If something as small as a watch requires a designer, how much more must the vast, ordered complexity of existence require one? This experiment shakes the foundation of certainty on both sides of belief. If the world is a watch, finely tuned, then who or what is its maker? If everything carries the fingerprint of purpose, then your own life is not random, but intentional. The air you breathe, the stars above your head, the consciousness pulsing inside you, are these accidents, or are they crafted with meaning you cannot yet see? But here lies the haunting twist. What if the watchmaker built the watch and walked away? What if the design exists, yet no guiding hand remains? Or what if the universe is so vast and incomprehensible that your search for a maker is only a reflection of your desperate need for order? The Watchmaker Argument does not hand you answers. Instead, it rips apart the belief that you already know what life is or isn't. It leaves you suspended between awe and uncertainty, staring at the gears of existence and wondering whether you are holding proof of purpose or the echo of chance. The Paradox of Inquiry. The paradox of inquiry, also called Menno's paradox, is a riddle that slices directly into the act of learning itself. It asks a devastatingly simple question. How can you search for something if you don't know what it is? If you already know it, there's no need to seek. But if you don't know it at all, how would you even recognize it when it appears before you? This paradox traps you in a cruel circle, where inquiry seems impossible from both ends. Knowledge makes the search unnecessary. Ignorance makes the search hopeless. The sting of this paradox is how often it echoes in your own life. You convince yourself you cannot start the business because you don't yet know how. You hold back from love because you aren't sure what it should look like. You avoid the dream because you can't see the whole path in advance. Like a prisoner of the paradox, you stand frozen, waiting for clarity before you move, while clarity itself waits for you to take the first step. What this experiment forces you to face is the brutal illusion of readiness. You don't need to know everything before you begin. In fact, you cannot. Discovery is not the reward for certainty. It is the child of courage. You recognize truth not by already possessing it, but by daring to meet it when it arrives. The paradox of inquiry tears down the lie that you must wait until you are prepared. It shows you that the act of stepping into the unknown is not the barrier to knowledge, it is the doorway. The invisible hand. The invisible hand is a thought experiment that tears through the illusion of control and forces you to confront how much of life is guided by forces you cannot see. Adam Smith described it as the hidden mechanism that allows individual self-interest to create collective order. Imagine countless people, each chasing their own desires, their own comfort, their own survival. No one is coordinating, no one is planning, and yet markets form, societies organize, and patterns emerge as if an unseen hand were pulling the strings. It feels like chaos from within, but from above, it becomes order. This experiment annihilates the limiting belief that you must control everything to create progress. It whispers that your desperate grip on certainty may be the very thing strangling growth. The invisible hand reveals that freedom, with all its unpredictability, can weave harmony from millions of selfish choices. It is terrifying because it exposes how powerless you really are, how the world keeps turning without your permission, how outcomes you depend on often arise from the invisible actions of strangers. But it is also liberating. The invisible hand challenges the fear that life requires perfection or micromanagement to work. It shows that sometimes releasing control allows a greater balance to unfold. Your relationships, your ambitions, your journey are not built only by your hands, but by countless, unseen influences converging around you. The thought experiment leaves you with a jarring realization. You are both insignificant and essential, a single thread in a vast tapestry being woven by forces you cannot command, yet somehow shaping a pattern bigger than you could ever design. The paradox of fiction. The paradox of fiction is a strange and unsettling puzzle about emotion and imagination. Imagine sitting in a theater, tears streaming down your face as the hero dies, or trembling in fear as the monster approaches. Deep down, you know it isn't real. The hero never lived, the monster never existed, and the story is nothing more than light on a screen or words on a page. And yet, your heart races, your chest aches, your body reacts as though the fiction were truth. How can you feel so deeply for something you know does not exist? This paradox slices into the heart of belief and emotion. It reveals how your mind does not separate reality from imagination the way you think it does. The body responds to stories as if they were lived experience, and the emotions they evoke are real, no matter how unreal the source. The paradox of fiction forces you to confront the idea that much of what you feel in life may not come from truth itself, but from the stories you tell yourself about it. The emotional weight of this realization is devastating. How many fears have controlled you, not because of reality, but because of the story you built around it? How many dreams have you abandoned because the fiction of failure felt too real? The paradox shows that your emotions are not chained to truth. They are chained to belief, and belief, whether born from fact or fantasy, has the power to shape the way you live, love, and suffer. The Library of Babel. The Library of Babel is a thought experiment that swallows you in the immensity of infinity and shatters your sense of meaning. Imagine a library that contains every book that could ever be written, every possible combination of letters, spaces, and punctuation fills its endless shelves. Somewhere inside, there is the story of your life written word for word. There are books that contain the cure for every disease, books that predict the future, books that reveal the secrets of the universe. But there are also endless volumes of nonsense, pages of random letters, lies, contradictions, and gibberish. The truth exists, but it is buried in an ocean of chaos so vast it may never be found. This vision rips away the comforting belief that knowledge alone guarantees clarity. In the Library of Babel, the problem is not a lack of answers, but an unbearable excess of them. How often does your own mind feel like this library? A million voices, ideas, and fears swirling in every direction, each one demanding to be true, drowning out the possibility of certainty. You are left paralyzed, unsure what to believe, suffocating in noise. But hidden inside the terror of the library is a revelation. Meaning is not found, it is chosen. Out of the infinite shelves of possibilities, you must decide which books to read, which truths to live, which stories to embody. The Library of Babel smashes the illusion that life will hand you a clear script. It forces you to face the void and realize that the only way to survive the chaos is to create your own meaning and walk your path as though it were the only book that mattered. The paradox of identity. The paradox of identity is a thought experiment that shakes the very ground beneath the question, who am I? Imagine a person at birth, innocent and new, then imagine that same person decades later, scarred by choices, molded by pain, shaped by love, and heavy with memories. Are they still the same person? If identity is tied to memory, what happens when those memories fade? If it is tied to the body, what happens as every cell is replaced, as time erodes the face in the mirror? If it is tied to the soul, how can you prove such a thing exists? This paradox forces you to confront the terrifying possibility that the self you cling to is fluid, fractured, and unstable. You tell yourself stories about continuity, that you are the same person who made mistakes 10 years ago, the same person who dreamed as a child. But are you? Or are you a series of strangers borrowing the same name, wearing the same skin, passing the torch from one version of you to the next? The emotional sting lies in what this does to your limiting beliefs. If you are not the same person you once were, then why chain yourself to old failures, regrets, or labels? Why keep carrying the weight of identities that no longer fit? The paradox of identity reveals that self is not a prison, but a river, constantly moving, constantly changing. It whispers that you are not bound to who you were yesterday, and you do not yet know who you can become tomorrow. The paradox of trust. The paradox of trust is a thought experiment that strikes at the very core of human connection by revealing the danger hidden inside vulnerability. To trust someone is to hand them the power to hurt you. You cannot trust without exposing yourself, without opening the doors of your heart, your secrets, your weaknesses. Yet the only way to build deep love, true friendship, or meaningful partnership is to take that very risk. Trust demands surrender, but surrender is exactly what makes betrayal possible. This paradox rips away the comforting belief that safety and intimacy can coexist perfectly. If you guard yourself completely, you may never be betrayed, but you will also never be truly loved. If you open yourself fully, you may discover the warmth of genuine connection, but you also invite the possibility of devastation. The paradox of trust is cruel because it offers no way out. The very thing that makes trust powerful is the same thing that makes it terrifying. It forces you to face how much of your life is built on faith in others, faith that your partner will honor you, that your friends will stand by you, that strangers will stop at red lights, and doctors will keep their oaths. Every moment of connection is a gamble, and every gamble carries the chance of loss. The paradox of trust strips you bare, whispering that love without risk is impossible, that freedom from betrayal means freedom from intimacy, and the only way to truly live is to walk willingly into the arms that could one day drop you. The paradox of growth. The paradox of growth is a brutal reminder that expansion often demands destruction. Imagine a tree stretching higher and higher toward the sky. To grow taller, it must shed branches that once gave it shade. Its roots must crack the soil, shatter rocks, and disrupt the ground beneath. Growth is not gentle. It is violent, messy, and full of loss. The same is true for you. Every time you grow, something in you must die. Old beliefs, old identities, old comforts, pieces of yourself you once clung to must be broken off so that something greater can emerge. This paradox burns because it collides with your longing for safety. You want to evolve but without loss. You want to expand but without discomfort. You want to rise without breaking what's below. But the paradox of growth makes it clear. You cannot carry everything with you. To step into the next version of yourself, you must leave parts of the old one behind. The emotional sting is realizing that the pain you feel in seasons of change is not a sign of failure. It is the cost of transformation. The friendships that fall away, the habits that no longer fit, the dreams that no longer call to you, these are not punishments. They are proof that you are moving. The paradox of growth whispers that the very things you mourn may be the soil out of which your future is being built. Growth destroys, but in that destruction lies the space for something unrecognizably new to take root.